Hi everyone, welcome back. We'll start building employee management full stack project. Next, let us take a look into the requirements. In our requirement 1, we will build crude REST APIs for employee management model. When we want to basically build add employee, get all employees, update employee and delete employee REST APIs. Next, in our requirement 2, we will build front-end React application for employee management model. Well, in this model, the user should be able to perform these crude operations, like user should be able to add a new employee, user should be able to list all the employees, user should be able to update the existing employee, user should be able to delete existing employee. Well, this is the full stack application architecture that we're going to follow in order to develop a full stack web application using Spring Boot and ReactJS. Well, this full stack application architecture follows client-server model. At a client side, we will build a React front-end application. At a server side, we will build Spring Boot backend application. Well, notice here in this full stack application architecture, we are going to create a separate project for React front-end application and separate project for Spring Boot backend application. Alright, and front-end application, backend application, both are loosely coupled. Alright, so Spring Boot backend application will basically expose the REST APIs and React front-end application will consume those REST APIs, and both applications are loosely coupled. So at a front end, we can also use different technologies to build the front end application. For example, instead of using ReactJS, you can also use AngularJS or Vue.js to create the front end application. Because both front end application and back end applications are loosely coupled. Loosely coupled means both front end application and back end applications are independent to each other. So you can use front-end application using any JavaScript framework, like you can use either ReactJS or AngularJS or Vue.js. Okay, so this is basically a client-server model. So at a client side, you can create front-end application using any JavaScript framework. Okay, so let us take a look into some of the key components and their roles in this architecture. So let us begin with Spring Boot backend application. Well, in a Spring Boot backend application, we will create the 3-layer architecture: the controller layer, service layer and DAO layer. The DAO layer is responsible to talk with the database, and service layer basically contains the business logic of the application, and the controller basically contains the Spring MVC controllers which exposes the REST APIs. Next, we have a React front-end application. It consumes the REST APIs that is exposed by Spring Boot backend application. And in React front-end application, we create the components, services, router, and React is not concerned with the HTTP library. We have to use third-party HTTP library to make a REST API call. Okay, so in this project, we are going to use Axios HTTP library to make the REST API call in a React application. Okay, and we are going to use a JSON format to exchange the data between React front-end application and Spring Boot backend application. All right. So just remember, ReactJS is not concerned with HTTP library. We have to use the third-party HTTP library to make a REST API call in a React application. And in this project, we are going to use Axios HTTP library to make a REST API call in a React application. Alright, so overall, Spring Boot backend application exposes the REST APIs, React application consumes the REST APIs. Alright, so this is pretty much about Spring Boot React full stack application architecture. Alright, great. I will see you in the next lecture. Hi everyone, welcome back. In this lecture, we are going to create and set up Spring Boot project in IntelliJ IDEA. Well, first, we'll create a Spring Boot project using Spring Initializer, and then we'll import that project in IntelliJ IDEA. So let us first go ahead and create a Spring Boot project using Spring Initializer. So let us go to the browser over here. In a new tab, just type start.spring.io. This will bring up Spring Initializer. Well, Spring Initializer is a web tool that we can use to quickly create a Spring-based applications. Next, let us go ahead and fill up the project information over here. So here you can see the projects section. Here you have different projects like Gradle Groovy, Gradle Kotlin, Maven. Since we are going to use Maven, so let us select Maven as it is. Next, here you can see the different JVM languages like Java, Kotlin, Groovy. As we are going to use Java, so let us keep Java as selected over here. And then here we need to choose the Spring Boot version. So we are going to use the Spring Boot 4, which is the latest version of Spring Boot as of now. So let us select the Spring Boot 4.0.0 RC1. Don't select the snapshot. Next, let us add the project metadata over here. So here, let us give group as net.javaguides, and then here, let us give artifact as EMS. EMS stands for Employee Management System, and then hyphen backend. Project name is same as artifact, so let us keep as it is. And then description, demo project for Spring Boot Employee Management System. Next, package name net.javaguides.ems. Next, keep packaging as a jar. In the configuration, keep properties selected as it is. If you are interested in YML, you can select YML as well. Next, choose Java version 25. Well, as of now, Java 25 is the long-term support release, so we are going to use Java 25. Next, go to the add dependency section over here. Just click on it, and here just search for web. Well, we are going to use Spring Web Dependency to develop the RESTful web services. So Spring Web Dependency internally provides Apache Tomcat as a default embedded container so that we can quickly run our Spring Boot application. So let us select Spring Web Dependency to develop the RESTful web services. Next, we are going to use Spring Data JPA dependency to develop the repository layer. Well, we use Spring Data JPA to reduce a lot of boilerplate code that is required to develop the repository layer or the DAO layer. Spring Data JPA internally uses Hibernate as a ORM framework for the database communication. So let us go ahead and select the Spring Data JPA dependency over here. And then as we are going to use a MySQL server, so we have to use the MySQL JDBC driver to connect our Spring Boot application to the MySQL server. So let us select MySQL driver dependency over here. Alright, so as of now, let us keep these three dependencies. Next, if you want to explore the project structure, you can go ahead and click on the explore button over here. So here, go to the pom.xml file. You can see the Spring Boot version and then Java version, and you can see the dependencies as well, and you can see the plugin as well. Okay. Next, if you expand the SRC folder, you can see this is a standard Maven project structure, and this is the entry point of our Spring Boot application. Okay. Next, go ahead and click on the close button. Next, click on the generate button to generate this project as a zip file. And you can see here, the zip file is successfully downloaded. Next, open this zip file in the folder. Next, let us go ahead and extract this zip file. Next, let us open the IntelliJ IDEA and let us import the Spring Boot application. So go ahead and click on the open button over here, and then go to the location where your Spring Boot application is present. In my case, it is in the downloads folder. And here I'm going to select EMS backend project. Click on select folder. Now in our Spring Boot application, we are going to use the Lombok dependency to reduce the boilerplate code. Like whenever we create a class, we need to create a getter setter methods, constructors, toString equals hash code methods, right? So instead of creating all these boilerplate code, we can use the Lombok library. So go to the browser, in a new tab, just search for Lombok Maven dependency and go ahead and click on the first link, and then click on the latest version over here, and then click on the dependency. It will copy to the clipboard, and then go to the project, go to the pom.xml file over here, and go to the dependency section over here, and at the end just paste this dependency. Perfect. Next, here we have a Spring Boot Maven plugin. It internally also provides a Lombok, but it is the old. So let us exclude the Lombok from this Spring Boot Maven plugin. So here, just add the configuration tag, and then add the excludes tag, and then add the exclude, and then here just copy the group ID, artifact ID version, and then paste over here. So we are basically here excluding this Lombok from this Spring Boot Maven plugin. Next, go ahead and click on this sync Maven changes icon over here. This will sync all the Maven changes. Perfect. Now we have added Lombok dependency to our Spring Boot application. Next, in order to work this Lombok in IntelliJ IDEA, we need to do a couple of settings. So go to the file, and here go to the settings, and then here just search for annotation. And here go to the compiler section over here. Under compiler section, you can see annotation processors. So we are going to use the Lombok annotations, and IntelliJ IDEA have to recognize those annotations. For that, we need to enable the annotation processing. So just tick mark, click on apply, and then OK. So apart from this, we need to also install the Lombok plugin. So for that, go to the settings again, and then here just search for plugins. So here go to the plugin section, and here just search for Lombok. Well, I have already installed the Lombok plugin in IntelliJ IDEA, but you haven't installed, then make sure to install the Lombok plugin as well. Okay, so these are the settings we have to do in order to work Lombok in the IntelliJ IDEA. Alright, perfect. So in this lecture, what we have done, we have created a Spring Boot project using Spring Initializer, and then we have imported that Spring Boot project in IntelliJ IDEA, and then we have set up the Lombok in a Spring Boot application as well. Okay, great. In next lecture, we will configure MySQL database in our Spring Boot application. Alright, great. I will see you in the next lecture. Hi everyone, welcome back. In this lecture, let us configure MySQL database in a Spring Boot application. Well, let's go to our project in IntelliJ IDEA and go to application.properties file, and within application.properties file, we are going to configure the MySQL database details. Well, before configuring MySQL database details in a Spring Boot application, let us first create a database in a MySQL workbench. So let's go to MySQL workbench over here, and here let us type the SQL statement, create database, and then followed by database name. Let us give database name as EMS. EMS stands for Employee Management System. Next, let us go ahead and execute this SQL statement and refresh the schemas. And here you can see EMS database successfully created. Next, let's go back to our project in IntelliJ IDEA and go to application.properties file. And within this application properties file, let's configure the MySQL details. So just type the property spring.datasource.url. Next, let us give the JDBC URL that connect to the MySQL database. So here JDBC MySQL and then localhost, and then the port 3306, and then followed by the database name, that is EMS. Okay, so this is the JDBC URL that we use to connect to the MySQL database. And look at here the localhost. Well, our MySQL server is running on local machine, that's why the localhost. But if your MySQL server is running on in different machine, then you can specify that machine IP address or the host name over here. Next, let us configure the database username and password. So here just type the property spring.datasource.username. Well, in my case, the MySQL database username is root, but make sure that whatever the database username you have used, you have to mention over here. Next, let's configure the password as well. spring.datasource.password. Well, in my case, this is the password, but make sure that you replace, the password you have given while installing a MySQL server. Next, let us configure the Hibernate properties. So here, let's first configure Hibernate dilate. spring.jpa.properties.hibernate.dilate, and then let us give the value org.hibernate.dilate.mysql dilate. Now we have configured MySQL dilate. Well, Hibernate uses this dilate to create the SQL statement based on the database that we are using. In our project, we are using MySQL database, so Hibernate will create the SQL statements that are compatible with MySQL database. Next, let's configure another property spring.jpa.hibernate.ddl auto equal to update. Well, this property is pretty useful in a development environment because this property tells Hibernate to automatically create the database tables if the tables are not existing in the database, and if there are any changes in a JPA entities, then it will also tell Hibernate to update those changes in the database tables as well. Alright, great. Now we have configured MySQL details in a Spring Boot application. Next, let us go ahead and let us run the Spring Boot application and let us see whether our Spring Boot application is able to connect to the MySQL server or not. So go to main etiquette class over here, and from here let us run the Spring Boot application, and here click on enable over here, and look at here in the console there are no errors or exceptions. It means our Spring Boot application is successfully connected with MySQL database, and you can see the important information. Spring Boot by default uses Hikari data source and Hikari connection tool, And look at here the Hibernate Dilate, MySQL Dilate. So this is the Dilate we have configured in a application.properties file. Alright, it means we have successfully configured MySQL database in a Spring Boot application. In next lecture, we'll create an employee JPA entity. Alright, great, I will see you in the next lecture. Hi everyone, welcome back. In this lecture, we are going to create an employee JPA entity. So let's go to our project in IntelliJ IDEA. And here, before creating the employee JPA entity, let's quickly create a packaging structure for our Spring Boot application. So go to base package over here, right click, new, and then choose package. Let's give package name as entity. Next, let us create one more new package. Let's call it as controller. Within a controller package, we keep all the Spring MVC controllers, and within the entity package, we keep all the JPA entities. Next, let's create one more package. Let's call it as repository. Within a repository package, we keep all the Spring Data JPA repositories. Next, let's create one more package. Let's call it as service. Within a service package, we keep all the interface and classes that are related to service layer. Next, let's create one more package. Let's call it as DTO. Within a DTO package, we keep all the DTO classes. Next, let us create one more package. Let's call it as exception. Within exception package, we keep all the custom exceptions. Alright, so as of now, let us keep these packages. Next, go to entity package, right click on it, new, and then choose Java class. Let us give class name as employee. Alright, next, let us go ahead and let us add the instance variables to this class. So here, private long ID, and then private string first name, and then private string last name, and then private string email. Perfect. Next, let us go ahead and let us use Lombok connotations to reduce the boilerplate code. So here, let us use @getter Lombok connotation to generate the getter methods for these instance variables. Next, let us use @setter Lombok connotation to generate a setter methods for these instance variables. Next, let us use @noArgument constructor annotation to create a noArgument constructor. Next, let us use @allArgs constructor to create a parameterized constructor. Okay, now we have created employee Pojo class. Let us make this employee class as a JPA entity by using JPA annotations. So let us annotate this class with @entity annotation from jakarta.persistence package, where we use @entity annotation to specify a class as a JPA entity. Next, let us annotate this class with @table annotation from jakarta.persistence package, where we use @table annotation to specify the table details. So here, let us use name attribute to specify the table name. So let us view table name as employees. Perfect. Next, let us configure the primary key for this employee entity. So here, let us annotate the ID field with @ID annotation. So make sure that you choose ID annotation from jakarta.persistence package. Next, let us configure the primary key generation strategy. For that, let us use @generated_value annotation. And next, @generated_value annotation has a strategy attribute. So here, let us configure the primary key generation type. So here, let us use identity. So this identity primary key generation strategy basically uses database auto increment feature to automatically increment the primary key. Okay. Next, let us use @column annotation to map a database table column with a class field. For example, here, let us have a column mapping for this first name field. So let us annotate this first name field with @column annotation from jakarta.persistence package, and let us give the column name first_name. So this column name will be mapped with the first name field. Okay, perfect. Well, if we don't specify @column annotation, then by default JPA will give the column name as field name. Okay, but the column name like first_name makes sense. That's why here we are using @column annotation to explicitly configure the column name for this field. Okay, perfect. Next, let us annotate last name field with @column annotation, and let's give column name as last_name. Next, let us annotate email field with @column annotation, and let us give a column name as email. underscore ID. Next, let us make this email underscore ID column as a not null by using the label equal to false attribute. And we can also make this email as a unique by using unique equal to true. Alright, now we have created employee JPA entity. Next, let us run our Spring Boot application and let us see whether Hibernate will automatically create this employees table in a database or not. So let's go to main entity part class over here. From here, let us rerun the Spring Boot application. When look at here, there are no errors or exception in the console. It means our Spring Boot application is successfully connected to the MySQL server. So let's go to MySQL Workbench and let us refresh the schemas and expand this EMS, expand tables, and there we go. You can see employees table is successfully created. Next, right click on this employees table, select rows, and let us verify the columns, ID, email underscore ID, first name, last name. Alright, so this looks good. So let me recap what we have done in this lecture. We have created employee JPA entity and we ran the Spring Boot application and we have seen that Hibernate is successfully created employees database table in a MySQL database. Alright, great. I will see you in the next lecture. Hi everyone, welcome back. In previous lecture, we have created employee JPA entity. In this lecture, we are going to create employee repository. So let's go to our project in IntelliJ IDEA and go to repository package over here. Right click on repository package, new one, then choose Java class, select interface. Let us give interface name as employee repository. Next, let us extend this employee repository interface from JPA repository interface and make sure that you choose JPA repository interface from org.springframework.data.jpa.repository package. Well, notice here JPA repository is a generic interface, so we have to pass two parameters. First parameter is the type of the entity. Second parameter is the type of the primary key. So let us select JPA repository over here and let us pass the parameters. First parameter is the type of the entity. In our case, employee entity. Next, let us pass the type of the primary key, that is long. Well, if you go to employee JPA entity, you can see here we have given the type to the primary key ID as a long. So this long data type we are passing to JPA repository as a second parameter. Okay, perfect. Well, once our employee repository interface extends JPA repository interface, then this employee repository will get a CRUD methods to perform CRUD database operations on this employee JPA entity. Alright, so if you go to JPA repository interface source code, you can see JPA repository interface provides these methods, and again JPA repository interface extends list CRUD repository interface, and list CRUD repository interface provides all these methods, and this list CRUD repository method internally extends CRUD repository interface, and this CRUD repository interface exposes CRUD methods to perform CRUD database operations. Alright, it means this JPA repository will inherit all the methods from all the extended interfaces. And again, Spring Data JPA will provide the implementation for this JPA repository interface. For example, if you click on this, you will get the implementation classes. And here, simple JPA repository is a class that implements all the methods of JPA repository interface and its, child interfaces. So just click on simple JPA repository class over here. And you can see simple JPA repository class implements JPA repository implementation interface, and this interface internally extends JPA repository interface. It means simple JPA repository indirectly implements JPA repository interface and its methods. Alright, and if you can notice here, simple JPA repository class, it is already annotated with add repository annotation. So we don't have to annotate our repository interface with add repository annotation. For example, if you go to employee repository, we don't have to annotate this employee repository interface with add repository annotation, because the implementation class, that is simple JPA repository class, is already annotated with add repository annotation. And here one more important point is simple JPA repository class annotated with add transactional annotation. It means all the methods in a simple JPA repository class are by default transactional. We don't have to use again add transactional annotation in a service layer to make the methods as a transactional. Okay. For example, if you just scroll down, you can see Delete by ID method is a transactional because it is annotated with add transactional annotation, and delete method is a transactional because it is annotated with add transactional annotation. Alright, so all the public methods in a simple JPA repository class are transactional, so we don't have to again use add transactional annotation to make these methods transactional. Alright, just remember these couple of important points, like simple JPA repository is a class that implements JPA repository interface, and simple JPA repository class is already annotated with add repository annotation, so we don't have to again annotate our repository interfaces with add repository annotation. And simple JPA repository class is annotated with add transaction annotation, so all the methods, all the public methods in a simple JPA repositories are by default transactional. We don't have to again make those methods transactional by using add transactional annotation. Alright, perfect. So let me recap what we have done in this lecture. We have created employee repository interface that extends JPA repository interface. So this employee repository will get code methods to perform code database operations on employee JPA entity. In next lecture, we will create an employee DTO and employee mapper classes. Alright, great. I will see you in the next lecture. Hi everyone, welcome back. In this lecture, we will create an employee DTO and employee mapper classes. So let's go to our project in IntelliJ IDEA. I go to DTO package over here, right click on DTO package, new, and then choose Java class. Let's give class name as employee DTO. Perfect. Next, let us define the instance variables for this class. So here private long ID, and then private string first name, and then private string last name, and then private string email. Next, let us annotate this class with @getter number connotation to generate a getter methods for these instance variables. Next, let us use @setter number connotation to generate a setter methods for these instance variables. Next, let us use @no-argument constructor and @all-argument constructor annotations to create a constructors for this class. Well, we use employee DTO class to transfer the data between client and server. So when we build the RESTful web services, we'll use this employee DTO as a response for REST APIs. Next, let us create an employee mapper class to map employee entity to employee DTO and employee DTO to employee entity. So whenever we build the RESTful services, then we have to convert employee DTO into employee JPA entity and employee JPA entity into employee DTO, right? So instead of writing the same logic in all the classes, let's create a mapper class and let's keep the common logic. So here what we'll do, we'll create a new package. Let's call it as mapper. Let's create a class. Let's give class name as employee mapper. And next, let us create a static method, public static. Let's give return type as employee DTO, and let's give method name is map to employee DTO. And let us pass employee JPA entity as a parameter to this method. And next, here return new employee DTO, and let us pass the values to the constructor. So let us get all the values from employee JPA entity and let us set those values to the employee DTO. So here employee dot get ID, and then employee dot get first name, employee dot get last name, employee dot get email. Perfect. Now we have created a map to employee DTO method. It will map employee JPA entity into employee DTO. Similarly, let's create one more method that will map employee DTO to employee JPA entity. So here public static, let us give employee JPA entity as a return type. Next, let us give method name as map to employee, and let us pass employee DTO as a parameter to this method. Next, return object. So let us construct the object of employee JPA entity, and here employee DTO dot get ID, employee DTO dot get first name, employee DTO dot get last name, employee DTO dot get email. Alright, perfect. Now we have created map to employee static method. It convert employee DTO into employee JPA entity. Alright, perfect. So let me recap what we have done in this lecture. We have created employee DTO class to transfer the data between client and server. And next we have created employee mapper class to map employee entity to employee DTO and employee DTO to employee entity. Alright, great. In next lecture onwards, we will start building the RESTful web services. Alright, great. I will see you in the next lecture. Hi everyone, welcome back. In this lecture, we will build add employee REST API. Well, let us take a look into the development steps. First, we will create the service layer. Well, if you can see here, the controller layer depends on service layer and the service layer depends on a repository layer, and we basically create the REST APIs in a controller layer, right? So controller layer depends on service layer. So let us first create the service layer. Well, we have already created the repository layer, so we don't have to write any methods in the repository layer as of now. So let us first create the service layer and then we'll build the REST API in a controller layer. Okay. So create the service layer, like we'll create an employee service interface and then we create an employee service IMP class that implements employee service interface. Next, we'll build the add employee REST API in a controller layer, and next we'll test this add employee REST API using Postman client. Okay, so let us go to our project in IntelliJ IDEA, and here let us first create the service layer. So go to service package, right click on it, new, and then choose Java class, select interface. Let us give interface name as employee service. Within employee service interface, let us define the method. So let us give method return type as employee DTO. Let us give method name as create employee, and let us pass employee DTO as a parameter to this method. Perfect. Next, let us create employee service IMP class that implements this interface and its methods. Next, go to service package, right click on this package, new, and then choose package. Let's give package as IMPL. IMPL stands for implementation. So right click on IMPL package, new, and then choose Java class. Let's give class name as employee service IMPL. Perfect. Next, this class implements employee service interface. And next, go ahead and mouse over in this class, and here you will get the option to implement the methods like the link. So go ahead and click on this implement methods link over here and select the method that you want to implement. Click on OK. Perfect. Next, let us annotate this class with @service annotation, and make sure that you choose service annotation from org.springframework.stereotype package. Well, this annotation tells the Spring container to create the Spring Bean for this class. Next, let us implement create employee method. Well, before implementing this method, let us first inject the dependencies. So here, private employee repository, where we are going to use constructor based dependency injection to inject the dependencies, and instead of creating the constructor manually, let us use Lombok annotation. So let us annotate this class with @ or argument constructor annotation. Okay, now we have injected employee repository as a dependency. Next, let us implement create employee method. So go to create employee method, and within this create employee method, first we need to convert employee DTO into employee JPA entity, because we need to store the employee entity into database, isn't it? So here, let's say employee equal to, let us call employee mapper class to map employee DTO to employee JPA entity. So here employee mapper, it has map to employee method and then pass employee DTO. Okay, now we have converted employee DTO to employee JPA entity. Next, let us save this employee JPA entity into database. So for that, let us call employee repository. It has a save method and then pass employee JPA entity object. Perfect. Next, this save method return the saved employee object. So let us get into a local variable. So here employee, and let us use a variable name as saved employee. Next, we need to return saved employee object back to the client. So here let us convert saved employee JPA entity into employee DTO. So here let us remove this null and let us type employee mapper. It has map to employee DTO, and let us pass saved employee. Perfect. Now we have implemented create employee method. Next, go to controller package over here. Right click on controller package, new, and then choose Java class. Let us give class name as employee controller. Next, let us annotate this employee controller class with @REST controller annotation. Well, once we annotate a class with @REST controller annotation, then this class becomes a Spring MUC REST controllers, and this class is capable to handle HTTP requests. Next, let us annotate this class with one more annotation, that is @request mapping annotation. Well, here we are using @request mapping annotation to define the base URL for all the REST APIs that we are going to build within this controller. So here let us give the base URL /API/employees. Okay, perfect. Next, within this employee controller, let us first inject the dependencies. So private employee service, and instead of creating the constructor manually, let us annotate this class with @argument constructor annotation. Okay. Next, let us build add employee REST API. So here let me write the comment, build add employee REST API. Well, creating REST API using Spring Boot is very simple. First, we need to create a method, and then we will make that method as a REST API by using Spring annotations. So here let's first create a method, public. Let's go return type of the method as a response entity. So response entity is a generic class. We have to pass the type. So here let us pass employee DTO as a type. Next, let us give method name as create employee, and let us pass employee DTO as a parameter to this method. And next, here let us call employee service. It has create employee method, and then pass employee DTO object as a parameter to this method. And this create employee method returns a saved employee. So here employee DTO, and let us give the variable name as saved employee. Next, let us have a return statement, return object of response entity. So let us pass value to the constructor. So first value as saved employee, second value as HTTP status code. So here just add HTTP status dot created. Next, let us make this method as a REST API by using Spring annotations. So here let us annotate this method with @postmapping annotation. Well, we use @postmapping annotation to map the incoming HTTP post request to this method. Next, let us use one more annotation here, that is @requestBody annotation. Well, this @requestBody annotation will extract the JSON from the HTTP request, and it will convert that JSON into employee DTO Java object. Okay, perfect. Now we have created add employee REST API. Next, let us run our Spring Boot application and let us test this REST API using Postman client. So from here, I am going to stop and run the Spring Boot application. Well, notice here our Spring Boot application is up and running and an embedded template server on port 8080. Next, let's go to the Postman client over here, and here let me create a new request. Let us choose HTTP post method, and let us enter the request URL HTTP localhost 8080/API/employees, and next go to the body, select raw, select content.json, and within the body we need to pass the JSON object. So here let's create a JSON object. So first name, let us give first name as Ramesh, and then last name, let us give last name as birthday, and then email, let us give email as ramesh@gmail.com. Well, if you can go to our project in IntelliJ IDEA and go to create employee REST API, and here you can see employee DTO, and if you go inside employee DTO, and this employee DTO class has the fields first name, last name, email, and if you go to Postman client, and if you can notice the JSON over here, the attributes name like first name, last name, email. So whenever you pass the JSON in the request, make sure that the JSON attributes should be same as the DTO class fields, because we are using @requestBody annotation here to extract the JSON and convert that JSON into employee DTO Java class object. And in order to convert a JSON into Java object, the JSON attributes and Java object fields should be same. Okay, perfect. Next, let's go to Postman client over here. Next, go ahead and click on send button. And there we go. We got a response of the REST API, and if you can notice here the status 201 created and the saved employee object in the response. Next, let us verify whether this record is stored in a MySQL database table or not. So let's go to MySQL bench over here and go to employees database, just refresh, go to employees table, select rows, and there we go. Ramesh employee successfully stored in a employees table. Alright, it means we have successfully built add employee REST API. In next lecture, we will build get single employee REST API. Alright, great. I will see you in the next lecture. Hi everyone, welcome back. In this lecture, we are going to build get employee REST API. So let's go to our project in IntelliJ IDEA and let us first change the service layer, and then we'll change the controller layer because the controller layer depends on service layer. So let's go to employee service interface over here. Within this interface, let us define the get employee by ID method. So here, let us give employee DTO as a return type of the method, and let us give method name as get employee by ID, and let us pass employee ID as a parameter to this method. Perfect. Now we have defined get employee by ID method in a employee service interface. Next, let us implement this method in employee service IMPL class. So let us go to employee service IMPL class over here and just mouse over on this class, and here we have implement methods link. So go ahead and click on this link over here and then select the method that we want to implement. Next, click on OK. Perfect. So here we can implement the get employee by ID method. Well, before implementing this method, let's go ahead and let's first create one custom exception. Well, whenever an employee with a given ID is not exist in database, then we have to throw the custom exception, isn't it? So let us go ahead and let us first create the custom exception. So go to exception package, right click, new, and choose Java class. Let us give exception name as resource not found exception. Perfect. Next, let us extend this class from runtime exception, and then let us create a parameters constructor public resource not found exception, and then let us pass message as a parameter. Alright, and here let us call super keyword to pass this message to the super class constructor. Next, let us annotate this class with @response status annotation, and let us specify the HTTP status. So here, let us give HTTP status not found. Well, if employee with a given ID is not exist in database, then we will throw this resource not found exception, and then Spring Boot will catch this exception and it will get the error message from the exception, and it will send the error message along with the HTTP status to the client. Next, let us go back to employee service IMPL class over here. Next, let us implement this get employee ID method. So here, let me maximize this. So within the get employee by ID method, let us call employee repository. It has find by ID method, and notice here find by ID method returns optional of type employee. So let us call find by ID method over here and just pass employee ID. Next, optional has or else throw method. So here let us call or else throw method over here, and notice here or else throw method returns a employee object, and or else throw method takes supplier as a functional interface, and we have to pass the lambda expression implementation of this supplier functional interface. So let us call this or else throw method over here, and let us create the lambda expression. So here lambda symbol, and then new resource not found exception, and let us pass the message employee is not exist with a given ID. Alright, and let us pass the ID dynamically over here. That is employee ID. Perfect. Next, let me maximize this a bit. Next, you can see the typo here exists, so let me correct it. Employee is not exist with a given ID, and then employee ID. Next, let me also break this statement. Perfect. So this or else throw method returns a employee object. So here let us take the result of this or else throw method in a local variable of type employee. Perfect. Next, if you can notice here, get employee ID method returns a employee DTO. So let us convert this employee JPA entity into employee DTO. So go to return statement, remove this null, and let's call employee mapper over here. It has a map to employee DTO method. and then pass employee JPA entity object. Perfect. Now we have implemented get employee by ID method in a employee service IMPL class. Next, let us create the REST API that will internally call this get employee by ID method. So here, let me minimize this and go to employee controller over here. And within the employee controller, let us build get employee by ID REST API. So here, let me write the comment build get employee REST API. Well, creating a REST API using Spring Boot is very simple. We just need to create a method and then we'll convert that method into REST API by using Spring annotations. So here, let us first create a method public and then response entity as a return type. Response entity is a generic. So let us pass employee DTO as a type. And next, let us give a method name as get employee by ID. Next, let us pass employee ID as a parameter to this method. Within this get employee by ID method, let us call employee service. It has get employee by ID method and then pass employee ID. Perfect. So this get employee by ID method returns employee DTO. So here, let us take the result of this method in a local variable of type employee DTO. Perfect. Next, let us have a return statement. Return response entity. It has a OK method. And next, let us pass employee DTO as a parameter to this method. Perfect. Now we have created get employee by ID method. Next, let us make this method as a REST API by using Spring annotations. So here, let us annotate this method with add get mapping annotation. Where we use add get mapping annotation to map the incoming HTTP GET request to this method. Next, let us pass the ID. Well, this ID is basically called a URI template variable. Next, we need to bind the value of this URI template variable to this method argument. So in order to do that, we have to use add path variable annotation. So here, let us use add path variable annotation, and we need to also pass the URI template variable name here, that is ID. So notice here, the URI template variable name is ID and the method argument name is employee ID. So both the variable names are different. That's why we have to pass the URI template variable name to the path variable annotation. Then only the path variable annotation will bind the value of this URI template variable to this method argument. Okay, perfect. Now we have created get employee REST API. Next, let us rerun our Spring Boot application and let us test this REST API using Postman client. So from here, I want to stop and rerun the Spring Boot application. Well, notice here our Spring Boot application is up and running in embedded Tomcat server on port 8080. Next, let us go to Postman client over here and let us create a new request. And here let us choose HTTP GET method and let us enter the request URL HTTP localhost 8080/API/employees and then /1. Well, if you go to MySQL Workbench over here and if you go to EMS database and employees table, you can see here we have Ramesh employee and Ramesh employee has ID 1. So in order to retrieve this Ramesh employee, we have to pass the ID 1 in the URL. Okay, so let us go back to Postman client and here we have passed employee ID 1. Okay, next click on send button and there we go. You can see the response. The REST API returned the response and the response contains the employee object in a JSON format and the status 200 OK. It means we have successfully built get employee REST API. In next lecture, we are going to build get all employees REST API. Alright, great. I will see you in the next lecture. Hi everyone, welcome back. In this lecture, we are going to build get all employees REST API. So let's go to our project in IntelliJ IDEA over here. And first, we'll change the service layer and then we'll change the controller layer because the controller layer depends on service layer. So let us go to employee service interface over here and within this interface, let us define the method. So let us give return type of the method as list of employee DTO. Next, let us give a method name as get all employees. Alright, now we have created get all employees method in our employee service interface. Next, let us implement this method in our employee service IMPL class. Let us head over to employee service IMPL class over here and just mouse over on this class. Click on this implement methods link. Next, let us select the method that you want to implement. Click on OK. Alright, now let us go ahead and let us implement this get all employees method over here. Within a getAllEmployees method, let us call employee repository. It has findAll method. We'll notice here there are multiple overloaded findAll methods. We are going to choose the findAll method. It doesn't take any method argument, and findAll method returns a list of type employee JPA entity. Okay, so let us select findAll method over here. Next, let us take the result of this findAll method in a local variable of type list. So here, let us declare list. List is a generic. Let us pass employee class as a type. Let us call it as employees. Perfect. Now we have list of employee JPA entities. But if you can see here, getAllEmployees method returns list of employee DTOs, right? So let us convert a list of employee JPA entities into list of employee DTOs. So here go to return statement, remove this null, and here just call employees. So employees is a list. It has a stream method, and then stream has a map method. And notice here map method has a function as a functional interface, and we need to provide the lambda expression implementation for this functional interface. So let us select map method over here. So basically we use map method to map one object into another object. And in our case, we have to convert employee JPA entity into employee DTO, right? So here, let us have a lambda expression implementation. So here, let us pass employee as a parameter, and let us have lambda symbol, and then call employee mapper. It has map to DTO method, and then pass employee object. Perfect. And finally, let us call collect method to collect the result. So here we are using list. So now let us call this collect method. It takes toList as a parameter. Now we have written a logic to convert a list of employee JPA entities into list of employee DTOs. Next, let us create the REST API that will internally call this method. So go to employee controller over here, and within employee controller, let us build getAllEmployees REST API. So here, let me add the comment, build getAllEmployees REST API. Well, creating REST API using Spring Boot is very simple. First, we need to create a method, and then we'll convert that method into REST API by using Spring annotations. So here, let us first create the method public response entity as a return type. Response entity is a generic, so let us pass list as a type. List is also a generic interface. Let us pass employee DTO as a type, and let us give method name as getAllEmployees. Alright, and here let us call employee service. It has getAllEmployees method. So getAllEmployees method returns a list of employee DTOs. So here let us declare a local variable of type list. List is generic. Let us pass employee DTO as a type, and let us give variable name as employees. Perfect. Next, let us have return statement, return response entity, and then call its OK method, and then pass employee objects as a parameter. Perfect. Now we have created getAllEmployees method. Let us make this method as a REST API by using Spring annotations. So here let us annotate this method with add_getMapping annotation. Well, we use add_getMapping annotation to map incoming HTTP GET request to this particular method. Alright, perfect. Now we have built getAllEmployees REST API. Next, let us rerun our Spring Boot application, and let us test this REST API. So from here, I am going to stop and rerun the Spring Boot application. Well, our Spring Boot application is up and running in a embedded Tomcat server on port 8080. Next, let us go to Postman client over here. And here, let me copy this URL, and let me create the new request. Let us choose HTTP GET method, and let us enter the URL. Localhost 8080/API/employees. Click on send button, and there we go. You can see the array contains a single JSON object. So let us insert one more employee. So go to add employee request over here, and let us change the JSON. Post name, let us say Sanjay. Last name, let us say Jadhav. Email sanjay@gmail.com. Next, click on send button, and there we go. We got the response and the status code 201 created. Next, let us go to getAllEmployees request over here, and then click on send button, and there we go. You can see here there are total 2 employees, and in a response also there are 2 employees. Next, let us insert one more employee. So go to post request, and here let us give first name as Tom and last name, close, email, tom@gmail.com. Click on send button, and there we go. We got the response with the employee ID 3. Next, let us go to get all employees request over here. Click on send button, and there we go. You can see a Tom employee is present in a array. Okay, it means we have successfully built get all employees REST API. Let us also verify the database table. So go to MySQL Workbench, go to employees table, select rows, and notice here there are total 3 employees. And if you look at the response of the REST API, there are total 3 employees, 3 employee JSON objects present in the array. Okay, it means we have successfully built get all employees REST API. In next lecture, we will build update employee REST API. Alright, great. I will see you in the next lecture. Hi everyone, welcome back. In this lecture, we are going to build update employee REST API. So let us go to our project in IntelliJ IDEA. Well, first we want to change the service layer, and then we will change the controller layer, because the controller layer depends on service layer. So let us go to employee service interface over here. Within this interface, let us define the method. So here let us give employee DTO as a return type of the method, and let us give method name as update employee, and let us pass employee ID as a post parameter and employee DTO as a second parameter. And this employee DTO basically contains the updated employee details. Okay, so let us call it as updated employee. Okay, perfect. Now we have defined update employee method in an employee service interface. Next, let us implement this method in an employee service IMPL class. So let us go to employee service IMPL class over here. Just mouse over in this class, click on this implement methods, and then click on OK method. Now let us go and let's implement update employee method. Within update employee method, let us first add the validation, like if employee with a given ID is not existing database, then we have to throw the resource not found exception, isn't it? So let us write that logic here. So just call employee repository. It has find by ID method, and notice here find by ID method returns optional of type employee. So let us call find by ID method over here, and then pass employee ID as a parameter, and then optional has or else throw method. So let us call or else throw method over here, and notice here or else throw method takes supplier as a functional interface, and we have to provide the lambda expression implementation for this supplier functional interface. So just call this method, and then let us construct the lambda expression. So here new resource not found exception, and then let us pass the custom exception message. Let us say employee 8 employees not exist with given ID, and then pass employee ID dynamically. Perfect. Next, let me put the semicolon over here. Alright, and this or else throw method returns an employee object. So here let us take the result of or else throw method in a local variable of type employee. Perfect. Next, we have the updated employee object. It contains all the employee updated information. So let us set all the details from updated employee object into this employee object. Okay, so here employee dot set first name, and then updated employee dot get first name, employee dot set last name, and then updated employee dot get last name, employee dot set email, and then updated employee dot get email. Perfect. Next, let us call employee repository. It has a save method, and then pass this employee object. Okay, so here basically we have updated this employee object with first name, last name, email, and again we are saving this employee object by using save method. So basically this save method performs both save and update operation. Well, if employee object contains ID, then this save method internally perform the update operation, and if employee ID doesn't contain the primary key ID, then it will perform the insert operation. Alright, next this save method returns the updated employee object. So here let us declare the updated employee object like this. Perfect. Next, if you can see here, update employee method returns the employee DTO. So let us convert this updated employee object JPA entity into employee DTO. So here go to return statement, remove this null, and then call employee mapper. It has map to employee DTO method and then pass update employee object as a parameter. Now we have implemented update employee method in a employee service IMPL class. Next, let us create the REST API that will internally call this update employee method. So go to employee controller over here. Within employee controller, let us build update employee REST API. So here, let me first write the comment build update employee REST API. Let us first create a method and then we'll convert that method into REST API by using Spring annotations. So here just type public response entity and then pass employee DTO as a type. Let us give method name as update employee. Alright, and let us pass employee ID as a first argument and employee DTO as a second argument. So this employee DTO is nothing but updated employee information. Perfect. Next, let us call employee service. It has update employee method and then pass employee ID as a first parameter, updated employee as a second parameter. Perfect. Next, this update employee method returns employee DTO. So here let us have a local variable of type employee DTO. Alright, next let us have a return statement, return response entity and then call OK method and then pass employee DTO. Alright, now we have created update employee method. Let us make this method as a REST API by using Spring annotations. So let us annotate this method with @putMapping annotation. Well, we use @putMapping annotation to map incoming HTTP put request to this method. Next, let us pass the ID. So here is the syntax. Within a open and close curly braces, just pass the ID. So this ID is nothing but a URI template variable, and we need to bind the value of this URI template variable to the method argument. So in order to do that, we can use @path variable annotation over here. And next, let us pass the URI template variable, that is ID. Perfect. Next, we need to use one more annotation, that is @requestBody annotation. Well, this @requestBody annotation will basically extract the updated JSON from the request and it will convert that JSON into employee DTO Java object. Okay, perfect. Now we have built update employee REST API. Next, let us rerun our Spring Boot application and let us test this REST API using Postman client. So from here, I am going to stop and rerun the Spring Boot application. Well, notice here our Spring Boot application is up and running in an embedded Tomcat server on port 8080. Next, let us go to Postman client over here. And here, let me copy this URL and let me create the new request. And here, let us choose HTTP put method and let us enter the request URL localhost 8080/API/employees. And then we need to pass the employee ID that we are going to update. So let us say we are going to update the employee with ID 1. Alright, next let us pass the updated information in the body. So click on body, raw, content type JSON, and here we need to pass the JSON. So here let me quickly create the JSON. First new. Well, if you go to MySQL Workbench and go to employees table over here, and if you look at here, employee ID 1 has a first name Ramesh, last name Partare, email ID ramesh@gmail.com. So let us update all these three column values. So let us update the first name from Ramesh to Ram, last name from Partare to Jadhav, email ID ramesh@gmail.com to ram@gmail.com. Alright, so let us go back to Postman client and here let us give the updated first name, that is Ram, and last name Jadhav, email ram@gmail.com. Next, go ahead and click on send button over here and there we go. You can see the response. The post name is updated, last name is updated, and email is also updated. Let us verify this information in database table as well. So let us go back to MySQL Workbench and here let us select rows from employees table. Notice here the employee ID 1, the post name is changed from Ramesh to Ram, last name is changed from Partari to Jadhav, email ID is changed from ramesh@gmail.com to ram@gmail.com. It means we have successfully built update employee REST API. Alright, great. In next lecture, we'll build delete employee REST API. Alright, great. I will see you in the next lecture. Hi everyone, welcome back. In this lecture, we are going to build delete employee REST API. So let's go to our project in IntelliJ IDEA over here. Well, first we'll change the service layer and then we'll change the controller layer because the controller layer depends on service layer. So let us go to employee service interface over here, and within this interface, let us define the method. So let us give void as a return type of the method, and let us give method name as delete employee, and let us pass employee ID as a parameter to this method. Next, let us go ahead and let us implement this delete employee method in our employee service IMPL class. So go to employee service IMPL class over here, just mouse over this class, click on this implement methods and choose the method that you want to implement. Click on OK. Alright. Next, let us go ahead and let us implement this delete employee method. So here, first of all, we need to add the validation like if employee with a given ID is not exist in database, then we have to throw the resource not found exception, isn't it? So if you go to update employee method over here, here we have already written the logic. Okay, so let us copy this piece of code and go to delete employee method, and here just paste this piece of code. So here basically we are calling find by ID method, and this find by ID method returns optional. So again here we are calling or else through method of optional object, and here basically we are providing the lambda implementation of supplier functional interface. So basically if employee with a given ID is not exist in database, then this piece of code will basically throw the resource not found exception. Next, let us call employee repository. It has delete by ID method, and then pass employee ID as a parameter to this method. Okay, perfect. So this delete by ID method will basically delete the employee by ID. Alright, next, let us create delete employee REST API that will internally call this method. So go to employee controller over here. Within employee controller, let us build delete employee REST API. So here let me write the comment first. Build delete employee REST API. So first we'll create a method and then we'll convert that method into REST API by using string annotations. So here just type public and then response entity as a return type. So let us pass string as a type, and then let's give method name as delete employee. Alright, and let us pass employee ID as a parameter to this method. Perfect. Next, within our delete employee method, let us call employee service. It has delete employee method and then pass employee ID. Next, let us have a return statement, return response entity dot OK, and let us pass the success message, that is employee deleted successfully, something like that. Perfect. Now we have created delete employee method. Let us make this method as a REST API by using string annotations. So here let us annotate this method with add delete mapping annotation. Well, we use add delete mapping annotation to map the incoming HTTP delete request to this method. Next, we need to pass the ID to this annotation. So here within a curly braces, just pass the ID. So this ID is nothing but a URI template variable, and we need to bind the value of this URI template variable to the method argument. So in order to do that, we can use add path variable annotation and then pass URI template variable name. Perfect. Now we have built delete employee REST API. Next, let us rerun our Spring Boot application and let us test this REST API using Postman client. So from here, I want to stop and rerun the Spring Boot application. Well, our Spring Boot application is up and running. Next, let's go to Postman client over here, and here let me copy this link and let me create a new request, and here let us choose HTTP delete method and let us enter the request URL localhost 800/API/employees, and here we need to pass the employee ID that we are going to delete. For example, let us say we want to delete the employee with ID 1, then we have to pass the employee ID 1 in the request URL. Next, if you look at the database table, employees table, so employees table has the employee with ID 1. Okay, now we are going to basically delete the employee with ID 1 from the employees table. So let us go back to Postman client and go ahead and click on send button over here and look at here the response. Employee deleted successfully and the status code 200 OK. Next, let us go to MySQL workbench, go to employees table, select rows and look at here the employee with the ID 1 is successfully deleted from the employees table. It means the delete employee REST API is working as expected. Next, let us delete one more employee, like we are going to delete an employee with ID 3. So let us go back to Postman client and here let us pass the employee ID that we are going to delete. We are going to delete employee with ID 3. Next, click on send button and there we go. We got the response, that is success response. Next, let us go to MySQL workbench, select rows from the employees table and there we go. You can see here the employee with ID 3 is successfully deleted from the employees table. Alright, it means the delete employee REST API is working as expected. Alright, great. I will see you in the next lecture. Hi everyone, welcome back. In this lecture, we are going to create and set up React application for our employee management system. Well, in order to create the React application, we are going to use ReactJS build tool. Well, ReactJS is a build tool that aims to provide the faster development experience. For example, if you go to browser and in a new tab, just type ReactJS and go ahead and click on the first link and click on the guide tab over here. So React is a build tool that aims to provide a faster and learner development experience for modern web projects. And this ReactJS provides a development server to run the React applications, and it will also provides a build command to bundle the React application. Okay. So basically, React is a build tool that aims to provide a faster and learner development experience for modern projects. And you can see here, React supports different types of templates, like you can use JavaScript or TypeScript. In this project, we are going to use JavaScript to build the React application. Well, in order to use ReactJS build tool to create the React application, you have to install the Node.js and npm. Well, in order to install the Node.js, you can just go to official documentation download page and you can go ahead and download the Node.js as per your operating system and you can install it in your machine. Well, npm comes with Node.js, so you don't have to install npm separately. Alright, well, let us first create the workspace for this React application. So here I am going to create a folder in a desktop. You can create a folder anywhere on your file system. So here I'm going to create a workspace folder in a desktop. So let me call it as full stack. Alright, within a full stack folder, we're going to create the React application. Next, let us open the Visual Studio Code ID in a full stack folder. So here, let me first open the Visual Studio Code ID over here. And here, go to File, Open Folder, and go to Desktop, select Full Stack Folder, click on Open. Now, we have opened Visual Studio Code ID in a Full Stack folder. Next, let us go ahead and let's create the React application using ReactJS. So here, I am going to use the inbuilt terminal. So go to Terminal, click on New Terminal over here. Alright, and here let me maximize this. And here, let us type the command npm create wait@latest and then followed by the React application name. So here we are going to give the project name as EMS-Frontend. Well, EMS stands for Employee Management System and this is basically a front end. Well, if you can notice here we are using the latest version of React. That's why I have mentioned @latest. Okay. Next, go ahead and hit enter. And look at here, it gives the options like select the framework. Well, we are going to use React. So let us select the React and hit enter. Next, we need to select the variant. Either we can use TypeScript or JavaScript. So let us use the JavaScript. So here, let us select JavaScript and hit enter. And there we go. You can see scan folding project is created under full stack folder. And if you can see here, EMS Frontend, React application is created under full stack folder. Well, if you can notice here, within a fraction of seconds, the ReactJS created the React application. Alright. Next, let us use these commands to install and run the React application. Well, first of all, we need to move into our project. by using this command. So here just type cd and then EMS frontend. Now we are in a EMS frontend project folder. Next, let us type npm install and hit enter. So this will install all the dependencies required for our React application. So it will take a couple of seconds. So just wait a couple of seconds and there we go. All the JavaScript libraries are installed, and if you expand EMS frontend over here, you can see node_modules folder is created, and within this folder npm install command will keep all the downloaded JavaScript packages. Alright, perfect. Next we need to run the command. So let me check the command npm run dev. So in order to run the React application using ReactJS, we have to run this command. So this command will run the React application in a development server. So here, let me first clear the terminal and just type npm run dev and hit enter. And notice here, the React application is up and running in a development server on port 5173. So here, let us copy this URL and go to the browser. In a new tab, just paste this URL, hit enter, and there we go. You can see Vite plus React. Okay. Next, let's go back to our project. And if you can notice the port over here, 5173. So let us change this port from 5173 to 3000. Well, ReactJS provides a configuration file named vite.config.js. So within this JS file, we can configure the development server related details. For example, here, let us create a server section. So this is basically an object, and within that let us have a port, and let us give port 3000, and then just save this file. And notice here, as soon as we save the file, the development server port is changed from 5173 to 3000. Okay, next if you go to browser and if you refresh here, it says this site can't be reached because we have changed the port. So here let us view the port 3000. Hit enter and there we go. Now you can see the React application is up and running. Okay, so this is how we can change the port of our development server. Alright, perfect. Well, let me recap what we have done in this lecture. We have created the React application using ReactJS. So basically we have used a couple of commands like npm create vite add playtest and then followed by project name. So this is the command that we have used to create a scaffolding project for our React application. Next, we have used npm install to install all the JavaScript packages or libraries for our React application. Next, we have used npm run dev command to run the React application in a development server. Alright, it's pretty simple. Just we have to use these couple of commands to create and run the React application. In next lecture, we'll understand the folder structure of our React application. Alright, great. I will see you in the next lecture. Hi everyone, welcome back. In previous lecture, we have created and set up React application. In this lecture, we are going to understand the React application project structure. Well, if you go to VS Code, here we have our React application. Next, let us understand the important files and folders of our React application. So let us begin with package.json file over here. Well, package.json file basically contains all the required dependencies and scripts required for our React application. For example, if you can go to dependency section over here, you can see the React library and its version, that is 18.2.0. React DOM is a library, its version 18.2.0. Okay, so within our dependency section, we configure all the dependencies required to our React application. Next, you can see the dev dependencies, and these are the dependencies for our development. Next, here we have scripts to run the React application, to build the React application, and to preview the React application. And here we have React application name, React application version, and the type like module. Alright. So basically in a package.json file, we configure all the dependencies and scripts required for our React application. And whenever we run the npm install command, then npm install command will install all the dependencies and scripts. Okay. Next, we have vite.config.js file. So within this JS file, we can configure the plugins and development server related details. For example, here you can see plugin section. So within this plugin section, we can configure all the plugins. And within the server section, we can configure the development server related details. Alright. Next, we have an index.html file. Well, we use ReactJS to develop the single page application, and in typical React application, you can find only one HTML file named index.html file. And if you go to index.html file code over here, especially if you go to body contains a single div with ID root. Well, React uses this div to render the component. Next, we have node_modules folder. Well, whenever we run npm install command, then npm will create this folder and it will keep all the downloaded JavaScript libraries and packages within this folder. Next, we have public folder. Within a public folder, we can keep all the static files like images and SVGs. Next, we have a src folder. So all the development related things will go inside a src folder. So if you expand src folder, you can see here main.jsx file. Well, main.jsx file is the main entry point for our JavaScript. For example, if you go to index.html file, within index.html file, the main.jsx file is imported using script tag, right? So whenever we run the React application, then index.html file will serve in the browser, and then it will internally call this main.jsx file. It means main.jsx file is a main entry point for all the JavaScript related code. And within a main.jsx file, you can see react DOM.create root and document.getElementById and then root. Well, this root is basically div ID. If you go to index.html file again, you can see here div has ID root, right? So again, if you go to main.jsx file, so here we are getting the div by div ID. And next, this React DOM again call the render method to render the component in a div. Okay, so basically React DOM uses create root method to get the div by div ID, and then again it will call the render method to render this app component within that div. Just remember, this piece of code is responsible to render the top level component in a div. Next, let us move into index.css file. So this CSS file contains all the CSS related code. Next, this is the default generated CSS code, so we can simply remove this code. Next, go to app.jsx file. So this JSX file contains an app component. So app component is a base level component or a root component, and this is the auto generated code. So what we can do is we can remove this code. Okay, we can write our own code over here. Alright, so here also let me remove this code. Let me remove the imports as well. Perfect. Next, go to app.css file. So here we can configure all the application level CSS classes. Okay, so here this is the auto generated code. So let me remove this. Next, go to assets folder. Within assets folder, we can keep the static files like SVG and images. So these are the important files and folders in our React application. Next, let us understand how the flow goes whenever we run the React application. Okay, so whenever we access the React application from the browser, then index.html file will get served in a browser, and then within a index.html file you can see script tag. Here basically imported main.jsx file, right? So next, main.jsx file will get called, and within a main.jsx file you can see here react DOM.create root method. So this create root method will get the div by using the div ID root, and then it will again call the render method to render this app component within that div. Next, within an app component we can write the code. For example, here go to return statement, and here let me write something like heading. So here let us use h1 tag to write the heading, for example hello world. Next, let us save the file, and you don't have to restart the development server. The changes will be automatically reflected. Next, let us go to browser, and you can see here hello world heading is displayed in a web page. Okay, so this is how the flow goes whenever we run the React application. Okay, so whenever we run the React application, the index.html file will get served in the browser, and then index.html has a script main.jsx. This script will be loaded in a browser, and then this script is responsible to render the component. Okay, next, if you go to a browser, So here just inspect this page, and if you go to console over here, you can see download the React Dev Tools for a better development experience. So go ahead and click on this link, and from here we can download the extension. So here I am using Chrome, so let me install the extension for Chrome over here and click on add Chrome, click on add extension. Alright, so this React developer tools is pretty useful. We can track the components. So here let me close this. Next, go back to our React application, and here let us refresh our React application, and here you can see the components. So here let me use this side, and you can see the components. So go ahead and click on components over here. Right now we have only one component, that is app component, and you can see its details, like the source is main.jsx. It means the app component is imported in this source file, that is main.jsx file. Okay. Next, what we will do, we'll quickly create one more component and we will import that component in this app component. So let's go back to our project, and here let me quickly create a file. Let's call it as hello world.jsx. Well, either you can use JS extension or JSX extension. Next, within a hello world.jsx file, let's create one functional component. So here let us type function. Let us give component name as hello world. Alright, and let us export it. Export default hello world. Next, within a functional component, let us write the JSX code. So first of all, let us have a return statement, and then let us use h1 tag to print the heading hello world. Perfect. Now we have created a simple functional component named hello world component. Next, we have exported this hello world component as a default. So let us import this hello world component in app component. So go to app.jsx file over here. Let us remove this, and notice here this tag is basically called a fragment. Okay, so this is an empty tag basically. So this tag in React is called a fragment. Within a fragment tag, let us import hello world component. So make sure that hello world component is imported at the top. Perfect. Next, save this file, and let's go to browser and just refresh this page and go to components, and here you can see the component tree structure, app component. Within that we have a hello world component. So this is how you can track the components, like the parent component and its child components. Alright, great. In next lecture we will see how to install Bootstrap in a React application using npm. Alright, great. I will see you in the next lecture. Hi everyone, welcome back. In this lecture we are going to add a Bootstrap to our React application using npm. Well, Bootstrap is a CSS framework that we can use to style the web pages, and basically we can create the responsive web applications. Alright, so installing Bootstrap in a React application is very simple. We just have to run the npm install command to install Bootstrap in a React application. Okay, let's go to our project in Visual Studio Code ID, and here let's open a new terminal. So go ahead and click on this plus icon over here. Next, let us go inside our project. Just type the command cd ems frontend, and in order to install the Bootstrap in a React application using npm, just type the command npm install and then followed by Bootstrap. Next, -- save. Well, this -- save option will add the Bootstrap dependency entry in a package.json file. Next, let us hit enter, and there we go. Bootstrap library is installed in our React application, and you can see the Bootstrap version 5.3.0. As of now, the Bootstrap CSS library version is 5.3.0. Next, let us verify in a package.json file. So go to package.json file, and you can see the dependency section, and within that we have Bootstrap library and its version 5.3.0. It means we have successfully installed a Bootstrap using npm. Next, we need to import the appropriate CSS file in a React application. Well, if you go to node underscore models folder and just search for Bootstrap folder over here, and within a Bootstrap folder we have dist. Within a dist we have CSS. Within that we have bootstrap min.css. So this is the CSS file we have to import in order to use the Bootstrap CSS classes. Alright, so let us go ahead and let us import this bootstrap.min.css file. So go to main.jsx file. So main.jsx is the entry point. So here let us import the bootstrap.min.css file. So just type import and then bootstrap, and then Bootstrap folder has a dist folder. Within dist folder we have CSS folder. Within that we have bootstrap.min.css file. Perfect. Now we have imported bootstrap.min.css file. Next we are good to use Bootstrap CSS classes. So in order to test that, what we can do is we can use one of the Bootstrap CSS class. So go to hello.jsx file here, and here we have reload component. So let us display this hello world heading at a center using Bootstrap CSS class. So here go to h1 tag and just call class name property and then pass the CSS class name, that is text center. So this is the Bootstrap CSS class that we can use to display text at a center. Next, let us save this file and let us go to browser, and notice here the hello world heading is displayed at a center. It means we have successfully installed Bootstrap CSS library in a React application. Alright, well, let me recap what we have done in this lecture. We have installed a Bootstrap library using npm install bootstrap --save command. Next, we have imported bootstrap.min.css file in a main.jsx file. Next, we have used one of the CSS class, that is text center Bootstrap CSS class, to test the Bootstrap installation in a React application. In next lecture onwards, we will start implementing list employee feature. Alright, great. I will see you in the next lecture. Hi everyone, welcome back. In next couple of lectures, we are going to implement list employee feature in a React application. Well, if you look at the screenshot over here, we are going to design the UI that looks something like this. Okay, so basically we are going to create a web page. It will display a list of employees in a table. Alright, in this lecture we are going to create a list employee component, and in upcoming lectures we are going to connect our React application to the REST API, and we will populate the response of the REST API in a list employee component. Alright, so in this lecture let us focus on creating React list employee component. Well, here are the development steps. First, we will create a React functional component named a list employee component. Next, we will prefer the dummy data to display in the HTML table. Next, we will write the JSX code to display list of employees in a HTML table. Next, we will import and use list employee component in a app component, and finally we will test all these changes. Okay, so the first step is create a React functional component named list employee component. So let us go to our project in VS Code, and here go to SRC folder. Within that, let's create a new folder and let us call it as components. Perfect. So within a components folder, let's create a file. Let us give name as list component or list employee component. Next, let us give extension as JSX. Perfect. Next, within this file, let's create a functional component named the list employee component. Well, instead of writing the same code to create the functional component, what we can do is we can use the code snippets. Well, VS Code has extension, that is React code snippets. So we can use this extension to quickly create the code snippets or the templates. Okay. For example, go to extensions over here and here just search for React snippets. Alright, and you can see the extension over here, ES7 plus React Redux Reactive Native snippets. So just click on it and go ahead and install this extension. Well, this extension is pretty useful because this extension provides a commonly used code snippets. Okay, so go ahead and install it. So I have already installed, that's why you can see uninstalled. So let me quickly uninstall it. So you can see the install button over here. So go ahead and just click on it. So once you install it, you can use the React code snippets. Alright, perfect. Next, go to list employee component.jsx file. So let me close this. Alright, so here let us use React code snippets command to create the functional component. So just type React functional component export and hit enter, and there we go. You can see we got the functional component code snippet. So instead of typing the same code, what we can do is we can use this kind of code snippets to quickly create a code like this. Okay, well, notice here we are using JavaScript function to create the functional component, but we can also use JavaScript arrow function to create the functional component. Well, I prefer using arrow functions over a JavaScript function. So here let us go ahead and let us use JavaScript arrow function. So you can also use the plain JavaScript function as well. Alright, so here let me remove this and just type the command React arrow function component export. Okay, just type RAFCE. So this gives React arrow function export component like this. Okay, perfect. Next, let us take a look at the next step. Next step is prefer dummy data to display in a HTML page. Well, in HTML table, we need to display something, right? For that, let us prefer the dummy data. So let's go back to list component over here. Within a list employee component, let's create an array. So const, let us give variable name as dummy data. So this is the array. So within array, let us create a employee object. So here first name, let us give ID first, ID1, and then first name Ramesh, last name Padpare, and then email ramesh@gmail.com. Perfect. Now we have created one object in array. Next, let me copy this. Let me create few more objects. So here ID2, and then first name Ramesh, last name Padpare, email Umesh. Next ID3, and here let's give first name Rajkumar, last name Padpare, email rajkumar@gmail.com. Perfect. Now we have created a dummy data to display in the HTML table. Next, let us take a look into next step. Next step is write JSX code to display list of employees in a HTML table. So let us go and let us write the JSX code to display the dummy data in a HTML table. So let's go back to our component, and here go to return statement. So let me maximize this. So go to return statement and let us remove this. Alright, so here let us first have a page heading. Let us say list of employees. So this is the page heading. Next, let's create the HTML table. So here table, and within table we have table header. Within a table header we have table columns. So the table column should be in a table row. Perfect. Let us give a column name as employee name or employee first name. Perfect. Next, let us give one more column name, that is employee last name. Next, let us have one more column, employee email ID. Perfect. So we can also display the ID as well. For that, let's create one more column over here. Let's call it as employee ID. Perfect. Now total we have 4 columns. Next, after table heading, let's create a table body. For that, let's have table body as table element. And next, let us have table row. Well, here we have an array. We need to iterate over array and we need to display each object in a table row, right? So for that, what we can do is we can write the JavaScript code over here. So in order to write the JavaScript code within a JSX, we need to use open and close curly braces like this. So here let us call dummy data array. It has a map method. So let us call map method over here. And notice here map method takes a callback function. So let us pass the arrow function. Well, we can use map method to iterate over an array and display each object. So here, let us pass the arrow function. So we can pass employee object as a parameter to the arrow function and then plat arrow symbol. And then here, let us have a tr element, that is table row. Alright. So here, let us remove this tr element because we need to iterate over an array and we need to display each row, right? Perfect. Next, each row should have a unique key. For that, let us use key attribute over here. And then within a curly braces, just pass employee.id. Alright, perfect. Next, within a table row, let us display the table data. For that, let's have a table data element. And then within a curly braces, employee.id. So this value should be populated in a employee ID table column. Next, table data element within a curly braces, employee.firstname. Next, td within a curly braces, employee.lastname. Next, td within a curly braces, employee.email. Perfect. Now we have written a code to iterate over an array and display each object in a row. Okay, perfect. Next, let us take a look into next step. Next step is import and use list employee component in an app component. Next, let's go back to our project and go to app.jsx file. And here, instead of hello world, let us import list employee component. So here, just call list employee component, just close it and make sure that list employee component is imported at the top. Okay, so here we have unused import, so let us remove it. Perfect. So let us take a look at the next step. Next step is run and test the React application. Well, let us go back to our project and let us see our React application is running or not. So here, go to the first terminal and notice here our React application is up and running. Next, let us go to browser and look at here the list of employees is displayed in the table, but the UI not looks good. So let us go and let us use Bootstrap CSS classes to style this page. Okay, so let us make this page beautiful by using Bootstrap CSS classes. So here, just search for Bootstrap CSS or Bootstrap 5 container. So we are using Bootstrap 5, so just search for Bootstrap 5 container and click on the first link. So here you can see we have three containers: container, container payload, and custom container. So let us use this container CSS class to display this data in a container. Okay, so let us go to Visual Studio Code ID and go to list employee component and go to this div here, and here let us use class name property and just paste this container CSS class. Okay, just save this file and let's go back to browser. And now you can see here this list of employees page, displayed in the container. Next, go to new tab and here just search for Bootstrap 5 table. Click on this first link and you can see the Bootstrap CSS class table. So let's copy this and go back to VS Code and go to table element, and here let us use class name property and just paste this table CSS class. Next, go back to browser. Let us use few more Bootstrap CSS classes. So here let us use table stripped. So let me copy this and let me paste it over here, and let us use one more CSS class, that is table bordered. Okay, so this is the table bordered. Okay, next let's go back to browser and go to our React application, and there we go. Now you can able to see the table looks good, right? And you can look at the page heading. The page heading should be displayed in a center, right? So let's go back to our code, and here let's use Bootstrap CSS class, that is text center. Let us save this file and let's go back to browser, and there we go. You can able to see list of employees table is displayed at a center. Alright, well, let me recap what we have done in this lecture. We have created a functional component named list employee component. Next, we have preferred a dummy data to display in the HTML table. Next, we have written a JSX code to display a list of employees in the HTML table. Next, we ran the React application and we have seen that a list of employees is displayed in a HTML table, and we have also used a Bootstrap CSS classes to style this list of employees page. Alright, great. In next lecture, we will connect our React application to get all employees REST API and we'll populate the response of that REST API in a table. So instead of displaying the dummy data, we have to display the real data that we will get from the REST API. Alright, great. I will see you in the next lecture. Hi everyone, welcome back. In this lecture, we are going to connect our React application with get all employees REST API. Well, here are the development steps. First, we'll install ArcGIS library. Well, in order to make a REST API call in a React application, we have to use third-party HTTP library. Well, in this project, we are going to use ArcGIS third-party library to make a REST API call in a React application. Next, we will create an employee service.js file. Next, within this employee service.js file, we are going to write a REST client code to make a REST API call using ArcGIS API. Next, we will change list employee component to display the response of the REST API. Well, instead of displaying the dummy data, we are going to display the response of the REST API in a list employee component. And finally, we are going to test all these changes. So first step is install ArcGIS library. So let us go to our VS Code and let us first install the ArcGIS library. So here, go to the terminal over here. So go to second terminal and here, let me clear the terminal first. So in order to install the ArcGIS, we have to use the command npm install and then ArcGIS --save. So this is the command that we use to install the ArcGIS. So just hit enter. Notice here the ArcGIS is installed. So let us confirm. So go to package.json file and go to dependency section and notice here the ArcGIS library is successfully installed. Next, let us take a look into next step. Next step is create employee service.js file, and within this file, let us write the REST client code to make a REST API call using ArcGIS API. So let us go back to VS Code and here go to SRC folder. Within that, let's create a new folder. Let's call it as services. Within a services package, let's create a new file. Let's call it as employee service.js. Next, within this employee service.js file, let us write the REST client code to make a REST API call using ArcGIS API. So here, let me minimize this. So here, let us import ArcGIS object from the ArcGIS library. So once we got the ArcGIS object, next we can call its APIs. Next, let's declare the constant. Let us give variable name as REST API base URL equal to. So here let us give the base URL for our Spring Boot project, that is http localhost 8080/API/employees. So this is the base URL for all the REST APIs for employee resource, right? Next, let us create a JavaScript function. Within that, we'll make get all employees REST API. So here, let us use JavaScript arrow function and let us export that function. So let us use export keyword to export the function and then const, and then let us use the variable name list employees and then flat arrow symbol within a open close braces. Let us have a return statement and then ArcGIS dot get method and then pass REST API base URL. Perfect. Now we have written a REST client code to make get all employees REST API call. Alright, and notice here this JavaScript arrow function has a body, and within the body there is only one statement, right? So we can even simplify this function. So for example, let us remove this open curly braces and return keyword and also the close curly brace. Okay, so this is the simplified version of this JavaScript arrow function. Okay, perfect. Now we have written a REST client code to make get all employees REST API. Next, let us take a look at the next step. Next step is change list employee component to display response of the REST API. So let us go to list employee component over here. And within list employee component, we have a dummy data. So let us remove this dummy data. So we want to display the response of the REST API instead of dummy data. Alright. So in order to hold the response of the REST API, we have to use the state variable. And in a functional components, in order to define the state variables, we have to use state hook. Okay. So just remember, use state hook allows us to use state variables in a functional component. Alright. So in order to use state hook, we have to first import use state hook at the top. So here, let us have open close curly braces, and within that, just import use state hook, and make sure that you use state hook from a React library. Alright. Next, use state hook is just a JavaScript function. So let us call use state hook, and use state hook takes the parameter. The parameter is the initial value of the state variable. So in this case, let us give empty array. Next, use state hook returns an array with exact two values. First is a state variable. Second is a function that updates the state variable. So here const and then array. So array should have two values. First is the state variable name. For example, in this case, employees. Second value as a function that updates the state variable. So the function name is set employees. Okay, just remember, use state hook allows us to define the state variables in a functional components, and this is the syntax to use state hook. Okay, so use state hook is just a JavaScript function. We can pass the initial value to this use state hook, and use state hook returns an array with exact two values. First is the state variable, second is the function that updates the state variable. Next, in order to make the REST API call or the AJAX call in a React functional components, we have to use effect hook. For example, here let us call use effect, and make sure that you choose use effect hook from React library, and make sure that use effect hook is imported at the top from the React library. Alright. Next, notice here use effect hook takes two parameters. First parameter is the callback function, second parameter is the dependency list. So here let us pass arrow function as a callback function, and second parameter is a dependency list. As of now there is no dependency, so let us keep empty array like this. Next, within a use effect hook, let us call list employees method from employee service, and this method has a then method, and look at here, then method takes a promise object. So let us have a promise object over here. A response is a promise object. Next, let us have an arrow function. Alright. Next, let us go and let us set the response to this employee's state variable. So in order to do that, we can use set employees method. So here just call set employees and then pass response dot data. Perfect. Next, let us have a catch block over here. So if there are any errors while calling the get all employees REST API, that we can catch here and we can display that error to the console. So here let us pass error object. So in order to display this, let us use arrow function over here and then console dot error and then pass error object. Perfect. Now we have written a logic to get the response of the REST API and store that data in a employees state variable. Next, scroll down and here you can see dummy data. We are not using dummy data variable. We are using employees state variable, and this employee state variable holds the response of the REST API, right? The response is basically a list of employees, and here we are using map method to iterate over this employees array and display employees in a table. Next, let us save this file and let's go to browser and just refresh, and here you can see the issue blocked by cost policy issue. Well, React application is running on port 3000 and Spring Boot application is running on port 800. Both the applications are running on different ports. That's why the browser typically gives this kind of cost policy error. Alright. So now in order to solve this issue, what we need to do is we need to handle this kind of cost policy issue at a Spring Boot application. So Spring Boot provides at cost origin annotation that we can use to allow React application to call the REST APIs. Alright. So let me show you how we can resolve this issue. So let's go to IntelliJ IDEA. I'll go to employee controller over here. And let us go and let's annotate this employee controller class with @cross origin annotation. And here let us pass star. So star means all the clients can able to call the employee related REST APIs. Alright, perfect. Next, let us go and let us restart this Spring Boot application. Alright, perfect. Our Spring Boot application is up and running. Next, let's go to browser and let us refresh the React application. And there we go. You can able to see the 2 employees are displayed in a list of employees table. Next, let us confirm whether this data is really coming from the MySQL database or not. So let's go to MySQL Workbench, go to EMS database, go to employees table, and look at here. The employees table has 2 employees, Sanjay and Ramesh. And if you go to React application, you can see Sanjay and Ramesh. It means our React application is successfully connected with get all employees REST API and displayed the response of that REST API in a list of employees table. Alright, I will see you in the next lecture. Hi everyone, welcome back. In previous couple of lectures, we have implemented list employee feature. In this lecture, we are going to add header and footer to the React application. Where you can see the screenshot over here, we are going to add header and footer like this. Okay. So in the header section, we are going to display the application name, and in the footer section, we are going to display the copyright statement. Alright. So here are the development steps. We'll create a header component as a functional component, and then we'll import and use header component in the app component. Next, we'll create a footer component as a functional component, and next we'll import and use this footer functional component in an app component. Well, the first step is create a header functional component. So let's go to our project and go to components folder. Within that, let's create a new file. Let's call it as header component.jsx. Perfect. And within header component.jsx file, let's create a header component as a functional component. So here just type the React code snippet, React arrow function component export, and hit enter. And here you can see header component is created. Next, let us design the header component. Well, here go to return statement and just remove this header component string. And here let us have header HTML element, and within that let's have a navbar, and let's add the Bootstrap CSS classes. Well, if you go to browser and just search for Bootstrap 5 navbar, click on first link and just search for the dark navbar. So here we have a dark navbar. So let me copy these Bootstrap CSS classes. So these are the standard Bootstrap CSS classes that we can use to design or style the navbar. So let's me copy them and go to header component and just paste them over here. Okay, perfect. Next, within a header, we need to also display the brand name or the application name, right? So let's go back to browser. In order to display the brand name like this in a header, we have to use navbar brand CSS class. So here let me copy this anchor tag and let me go back to header component, and within this navbar just paste it. And here let us give the application name or the brand name as employee management system, and here we can give the URL something like https www.javabits.net. You can give any URL that you want. Now we have written a code to design a simple header component. Next, let us take a look into next step. Next step is import and use header component in an app component. So let's go back to our code. And next go to app.jsx file, and here let us import header component. So just above this list employee component, just import header component and make sure that header component is imported at the top. Perfect. Next, save this file and let's go to browser and go to our React application and look at here. The header is successfully added to the React application, and employee management system project name is also displayed And you can see the console there is an error. Did you mean class name? Well, if you go to header component, so here we have to use the class name attribute like this. Okay. Next, save this file and let's go back to browser and just refresh this, and you can see there are no errors. Okay, now we have added header. Next, let us take a look at the next step. Next step is create a footer component as a functional component and import and use this footer component in an app component. Let us go ahead and let's create a footer component as a functional component. So let's go to our project in VS Code, go to components folder, right click, new file. Let us give file name as footer component.jsx. Perfect. Within this file, let's create a functional component named footer component. So in order to create the functional component, let's use React code snippet command. So React have a function component export. Next, let us design the footer component. So go to return statement and here let us remove this footer component. And within this div, let us use footer HTML element. Next, let's create one custom CSS class named footer and let us write the CSS code for this footer custom CSS class. So go to app.css file and here let me write the code. Footer is the CSS class name. It has a position offset, bottom 0, width 100%, height 50 pixel, background color dark, text align center, color white. So this is how we basically write the custom CSS class. So dot followed by the class name and within curly braces we define the CSS properties like this. Okay, next let us use this class name in a footer component by using class name property like this. Okay, next within a footer let's use spell element to define the footer copyright statement. So here all rights reserved 2023 by JavaScript, something like that. So you can write any copyright statement as per your requirement. Next, let us take a look at the next step. Next step is import and use footer component in an app component. So let's go back to our project and let us import and use this footer component in an app component. So after this list employee component, let us use and import footer component like this. And make sure that footer component is imported at the top. Next, let us save this file and let us go to browser and look at here the footer. All rights reserved 2023 by JavaScript. Okay, now the header and footer looks good for our React application. Alright, yet I will see you in the next lecture. Hi everyone, welcome back. In this lecture, we are going to configure routing in a React application. Well, here are the development steps. First, we're going to install a React Router DOM library using npm. Well, in order to configure the routing in a React application, we are going to use React Router DOM library. Next, we need to configure the routing in an app component. Well, in our React application, app component is a root component or a base component. So we have to configure the routing in an app component. Next, configure route for list employee component and then test route for list employee component. So first step is install a React Router DOM library using npm. So let us go to our project in VS Code and let us install React Router DOM library. And here let us open a new terminal and here let us go inside our project cd ems frontend and then here just type the command npm install a React Router DOM and then save option, hit enter. So this will take a couple of seconds and there we go. React Router DOM library is successfully installed. Let us verify in a package.json file. So go to package.json file over here and go to dependency section and notice here React Router DOM library is installed and notice here the version 6.12.1. Okay, perfect. Next, let us take a look at the next step. Configure routing in an app component. Well, let's go back to the project. Let's go to app.jsx file and here we need to configure the routing. Well, in order to configure the routing, we have to use routing related components from React Router DOM library. So here let us first import routing related components. So import. So these are the named export. So within a curly braces, just type browser router. So this named export from React Router DOM library. Perfect. Now we have imported browser router. So go to return statement and notice here we have header component, list employee component and porter component. Well, we no need to configure the route for header component and porter component because these two components are fixed. Okay. So we are going to only configure the route for this list employee component. So here we have to use this browser router at a top level. For example, before this header components, let us use browser router component here and let us close this here. Okay, so just enclose all the components within this browser router component. And next, this is basically a React fragment, and within a React fragment we are going to enclose browser router. Okay, perfect. Next, let us use a routes component from a React Router DOM. So here go to import and let us import routes from React Router DOM and go to header component. After that, just call here routes. So routes is basically a container or a parent for all the individual routes. Alright, so within this routes, we can define the individual routes. Alright. So here let's configure the route for list employee component. So first of all, let me remove this because we are going to configure the route for list employee component in a routes. So here just type route. So this route should be from React Router DOM. So here let us first import it. So go to import statement and here a route component from React Router DOM. Next, this route has path property. So here we can configure the URL for the component. For example, let us configure the base URL or the root URL. Whenever user enter this URL, that is HTTP, the localhost 3000 in the browser, then the corresponding component should be rendered, right? So for that, let us use element property and let's configure the component name. So here list employee component and then close it. Okay, so here basically we have configured a list employee component that this route will render whenever user hit this link in the browser. Okay, next let us configure one more route. Well, let us say if user enter the URL something like this in the browser, localhost 3000/employees, then we have to display the list employee component, isn't it? So here let's configure the route for the same route and then path/employees and the corresponding component name, that is list employee component. Alright, so whenever user hit this link in the browser, then the list employee component will be rendered. Now we have configured the route for list employee component. So here you can see the comment. So just select it and press Ctrl / and then here also select it and Ctrl / So this is how we can add the comment in a JSX code. Okay, perfect. Now we have configured the route for list employee component. Next, let us take a look at next step. Next step is test the route for list employee component. So let us go to browser and go to our React application, and here notice here the site can't be reached. So let us go back to our project and go to this first terminal and look at here restarting the terminal because the connection to send process was lost. So let us rerun our React application. So just clear the terminal. Next, let us type the command cd ems frontend and then let us run the command npm run dev. Perfect. So React application is up and running. Next, let's go to browser and just refresh and look at here the base URL localhost 3000. Well, you can use either this IP address or localhost. For example, here instead of this IP address, we can use localhost. Okay. So this is the route for list, component, right? For example, if you go to app.jsx file go to app component. So here we have configured the route for the base URL. So whenever user hit this link localhost 3000, then the corresponding component will be rendered in a browser, right? So this is what we are testing here. Localhost 3000 and the list employee component is displayed. Next, we have one more route, that is /employees. So whenever user hit this link localhost 3000 /employees in the browser, then the corresponding list employee component will be rendered, right? So let us test this. So let us go back to browser and here just type the URL localhost 3000 /employees and hit enter, and there we go. The list employee component is displayed. Alright, it means we have successfully configured the route for list employee component. Alright, so in upcoming lectures we will be creating a lot more components and we will also configure the route for those components. Okay, so I hope you understood how to configure the route for React components. Alright, so we have to use these three important components from React Router DOM to configure the routes, and make sure that this browser router component should be at the top. And next we need to enclose all the individual routes within a routes component. Alright, perfect. In next lecture onwards we will start implementing add employee feature. Alright, great. I will see you in the next lecture. Hi everyone, welcome back. In next couple of lectures we are going to implement add employee feature. In this lecture we will focus on creating employee component as a functional component. Well, here are the development steps. We first need to create a React functional component named employee component. Next, we will add employee button in the list employee component. Next, we will configure the route for employee component, and finally, we are going to test all these changes. Well, if you look at the screenshot over here, we are going to add employee button in a list of employees page. So whenever user click on this add employee button, then user should navigate to the add employee page. Okay, so the first step is create a React functional component named employee component. So let us go to our project in Visual Studio Code ID, and here let me minimize this and go to components folder, right click, new file. Let us give file name as employee component.jsx. Next, let us use React code snippets command to create the functional component. So here just type RAFCE. So this will create React arrow function export component. Now we have created employee component as a functional component. Next, let us take a look into next step. Next step is add employee button in a list employee component. So let us go to our project again and go to list employee component over here and go to return statement, go to heading. Right after this heading we are going to add the button. So here just type button. Next, let us use Bootstrap CSS classes to style this button. Well, if you go to browser and in new tab just type Bootstrap 5 buttons and hit enter, and go ahead and click on this link and just scroll down, and here you can see the Bootstrap CSS classes button primary, and you can see the corresponding button primary. So this looks good. So let us copy these two Bootstrap CSS classes. Let's go to our project and let us add these two Bootstrap CSS classes to button. So here class name property and then paste button primary, and let us give margin bottom 2, and let us give the name of the button add employee. Alright, next, whenever user click on this add employee button, then we have to handle on click event, right? For that, here let us have on click event handler, and next we need to pass the function here. So for example, here let us give function name as add new employee. Next, let us provide the implementation for this function. So here go to return statement. Just above this return statement, let's create the JavaScript function and then add new employee. Alright, so whenever user click on this add employee button, then we have to navigate that user to the add employee component, right? So in order to navigate user from one page to another page, we can use navigate hook. So here go to import statement, and here let us first inject use navigate hook from React Router DOM. So import within the curly braces, just type use navigate. So this use navigate hook from React router DOM. Next, use navigate hook is nothing but a JavaScript function. So let us assign this JavaScript function to a constant variable. So const navigator equal to use navigate. Next, let us use this navigator in a add new employee function. So go to add new employee function and here just call navigator and then pass the URL /add employee. Well, whenever user click on add employee button, then user should navigate to add employee page. Alright. So next, let us take a look into next step. Next step is configure the route for employee component. Well, here we have specified the URL, but we haven't configured the route for this URL yet, right? So let us go and let's configure the route for employee component. So let us go to app.jsx and here let us type route. Let us use its path property and let's configure the URL /add employee. Next, let us use the element property and let us specify the component name employee component. So whenever user hit this link in the browser, for example, let me copy this, paste it over here, and let me change the URL localhost 3000 /add employee. Then the corresponding employee component will be rendered in a browser. Okay. Well, if you go to list employee component.jsx file and go to add new employee, so here we have configured the URL /add employee. So whenever user click on add employee button, then user will navigate to the add employee route, and the component for this route is employee component. Okay. So basically whenever user click on this add employee button, then user will navigate to employee component. Next, let us take a look into next step. Next step is test the above changes. So let us go and let us test all these changes. So let's go to browser and look at here, add employee button is added to list of employees page. Next, go ahead and click on add employee button over here and look at here, the user is navigated to employee component. And if you can look at the URL, add employee. Alright. So if you can compare with the code, so go to VS Code and look at here, whenever user hit this link in the browser, localhost 3000 /add employee, then the corresponding employee component will be rendered, right? And within employee component, you can see employee component text. So this is a text displayed over here. Okay, it means we have successfully created employee component as a functional component and we have configured the route for this employee component. Alright, in next lecture, we are going to design add employee form. Alright, great. I will see you in the next lecture. Hi everyone, welcome back. In this lecture, we'll take a look into add employee form handling. Well, if you look at the screenshot over here, we are going to design the add employee form that looks something like this. So we'll basically create a card. Within that, we are going to create a form. Alright. So basically, we are going to use Bootstrap CSS classes to design this form. And this form looks good, isn't it? Next, let us take a look into the development steps. First, we'll define the state variables such as first name, last name, email in an employee component using useStateHook. Next, we'll design add employee form using HTML and Bootstrap. Next, we'll create a JavaScript function to handle onClick event. Well, whenever users submit the add employee form, then we have to handle the submit event, right? So for that, we'll create a JavaScript function. Next, we'll test the React application. So basically, we want to print the form data to the browser console. Alright. So first step is define state variables in a employee component using useStateHook. So let us go to our project in VS Code and go to employee component over here. And here, let me minimize this. So within employee component, let us define the state variables using useStateHook. So here, let us use useStateHook to create first name state variable. So just type useState and make sure that you import useState from React library at the top. So useStateHook is nothing but a JavaScript function. So we can pass the initial values. So here, let us pass empty value and then const and then array. So here, let us give state variable name as first name and let us give the function name set first name. So here, first name is a state variable name and set first name as a function name that we use to update the first name state value. Alright, next let us define the last name state variable using useState hook. So here const and then array, let us use state variable name as last name, set last name is a function name, and then use state, let us give initial value empty. Perfect. So similarly, let us define email state variable using useState hook. So here const and then state variable name email, set email as a function that we use to update the email state variable value, and then use state hook, let us give initial value empty. Perfect. Now we have defined the state variables like first name, last name, email using useState hook in a employee component. So this is the first step. Let us take a look into the second step. Second step is design add employee form using HTML and Bootstrap CSS classes. So let us go to our project and go to employee component, go to return statement, and here let us remove this employee component string. So we are going to display the form in a container. For that, let us use container Bootstrap CSS class over here. And next, let us create a div and let us pass the Bootstrap CSS class, that is row. Next, let us create one more div and let us give Bootstrap CSS class, that is card. Well, we are going to display the form within a card. That's why here we are using Bootstrap CSS class, that is card. Well, if you go to browser and go to new tab over here and just search for Bootstrap for your cards, click on first link, and you can see the Bootstrap CSS classes card body, right? So these are the Bootstrap CSS classes that we are going to use to create the card, and within the card we will create the form. Okay, so let's go back to VS Code, and here within a card, let's first add the heading. For that, let us use h2 element and let us give heading something like add employee. Perfect. Next, let us display this add employee heading at a center by using a Bootstrap CSS class, that is text-center. Perfect. Next, after heading, let us have one more div and let's give Bootstrap CSS class name, that is card body. Next, within a card body, let's create the form. Perfect. Next, within a form, let's create a div. Alright, and let's give Bootstrap CSS class, that is form hyphen the width. Next, let us give margin bottom to. Perfect. So within this div, let's create the label and input element. So here label, and then let us use Bootstrap CSS class for this label, that is form hyphen label. Next, let us give name to the label, that is employee first name, or let us give only first name. Okay, so let us remove this employee from here. Next, we need to have a input text box to enter the text. For that, let's have a input element over here, and then this input element has the properties like type. Let us give text, and then let's give the placeholder. Let us say enter employee first name, and then it has a name property. Let us give name as first name, and then it has value. So let us give value as a state variable name, that is first name. Well, if you look at here, we have defined first name as a state variable using useState hook, and this state variable we are passing to the value property here. Okay. Next, let us use the Bootstrap CSS class, that is form hyphen control. Next, whenever user enters some value in the text box, then we have to get that value, right? So for that, we can use unchanged event handling. So here, just type unchanged and just pass the event handler name. Let us say handle first name. So this is the event handler name. Next, let us create a JavaScript function to get the value from this input text box. So here let us copy this handler name. So here go to return statement. Above this return statement, let's create a JavaScript function. Let us give name as handle first name, and here let us pass event as a parameter. Next we can get the value from this event object by using event.target.value. For example, here let us call set first name method and then pass event.target.value. Alright, so this is how we can get the value from the event object. Now we have used set first name method to set the value to the first name state variable. Alright, so next go to form. So here we have created the field for first name. Similarly, let us create the field for last name and email. So here let me copy this div and let me paste it over here, and let me change the content accordingly. So here instead of first name, last name, and here placeholder enter employee last name and name last name, and let us pass state variable name, that is last name. Next on change and the handler name handle last name. Perfect. Next let us create a JavaScript function that will handle this unchanged event. So go to return statement. Just above this return statement, let's create a JavaScript function handle last name, and then pass event object. Let us get the value from this event object. So here let us call set last name, and we can get the value from event object like event.target.value. Alright, perfect. Now we created input field for last name. Similarly, let us create it for email. So let us copy this div and let us paste it over here, and let us give label as email, and here go to input element type, let's give password. Next placeholder enter employee email and name, let's give email, and value let us pass the state variable, that is email, and then let us give handler name, that is handle email. Alright, so let us create a JavaScript function that will handle this unchanged event. So go to return statement. Just above this, let's create a JavaScript function handle email, and then pass event object, and then call set email event.target.value. Perfect. Now we have created input field for email as well. Next let us create the submit button. So here let us have button. Let us give bootstrap CSS classes such as button success. Perfect. Let us give button name as submit. So here whenever user submit the form, then we have to handle the onClick event, right? So here let us have a onClick property, and here let us pass the handler name, let us say save employee. Okay, perfect. Next let us take a look into next step. Next step is create a JavaScript function to handle onClick event. So let's go to our project again. So here we have specified the handler name save employee. So let us create a JavaScript function that will handle this onClick event. So let's go to return statement. Just above this return statement, let's create the JavaScript functions, and let's give name as save employee, and then let us pass event object. Next within a save employee method, just call event object dot prevent default. So this will prevent the default activities that will happen while submitting the form. Next here let us put the console.log. So before that let's create the object. So const and then employee. Let us set all the fields to the object such as first name, last name, email. Next, let us print this employee object to the console. Alright, perfect. Now we have created a JavaScript function to handle form submission event handler. Next, let us take a look into next step. Next step is test the React application. Well, let us go back to our project and look at here. Restarting the terminal because the connection to the self process was lost. So let us start our React application again. So here, let me clear the console and then let us type the command cd ems frontend and then type the command npm run dev. Perfect. Our React application is up and running. Next, let's go to browser and go ahead and click on this add employee button over here. And notice here the add employee form not looks good. So some bootstrap CSS are missing for this add employee form. So let us go ahead and let us add some bootstrap CSS classes to make this add employee form more beautiful. So let's go back to our VS Code and here go to this div, that is container, and go to row, go to card, and here let us use bootstrap grid system related classes to align the form at a center. For example, here column mid 6. Well, the bootstrap grid has total 12 columns and we are using 6 columns for form. Next, we need to align the form at a center. For that, we are going to use offset to move columns to right and left. So here we are going to move the form by 3 columns from left and 3 columns from right. So here again offset mid 3. Okay, next, let us save this file and let's go back to browser, and now you can see the form is located at the center of the page. Next, here you can see the card is slightly attached to the header. So let us give some space between this form and header. So let's go back to employee component again, and here after this container let us have some break elements. Perfect. Let us save this file. Let's go back to browser and there we go. Now the add employee form looks good. Okay. Next, let us test this add employee form. So here right click, inspect, and then go to console, clear the console, and here just enter at first name Ramesh, last name Fadtare, email ramesh@gmail.com. So look at here, we have given the input type as a password. That's why the text looks like this. So let's go to our project again and go to form and go to email feed over here, and here input type password. So let us change from password to text. Okay. Next, let's go to browser, and now you can see email is visible, ramesh@gmail.com. Okay. Next, clear the console and go ahead and click on submit button, and look at here the employee object is printed and the employee has first name Ramesh, last name Fadtare, email ramesh@gmail.com. It means we have successfully done add employee form handling. Okay. Now let me show you some of the best practices that you can follow while form handling in a React application. Well, let's go to our project and go to employee component, and notice here we have written a separate handlers to handle each form input field, right? So instead of writing this much of code, what we can do is we can use JavaScript arrow function to set the values to the state variable in the input text field itself. For example, here go to first name and go to unchanged event handler. Well, notice here for this unchanged property, we are passing the complete function. We are not calling the function. Well, in JavaScript, we typically use the syntax like this to call the function, right? But here we are not using the braces over here. We are passing the function itself to this unchanged property. Okay. And this handle first name is a handler function. And this function basically set the value to the first name field. So here, if we write the arrow function, so instead of Java function, we can write the arrow function like this: const handle first name and then arrow symbol like this, isn't it? And here also for last name, we can write the arrow function const and then handle last name equal to and then arrow symbol. Next for handle email also we can write the arrow function like const handle email and then arrow symbol. So if you can notice the arrow functions, each arrow function body has a single statement, right? So if arrow function has a single statement in the body, we can also remove the open and close curly braces like this. Alright, so this is how we can simplify the arrow function. So here also let us remove open and close curly braces from handle last name and similarly from handle email. Perfect. Next, go to again first name field. Here we are passing the function itself, right? So instead of writing the separate arrow function like this, we can simply pass the arrow function body here itself. So let me copy this body and go to first name field and go to unchange event handler. Here instead of this, let me paste over here. So we can also provide the arrow function to unchange property like this. Okay, so again we can reduce this line of code as well. Similarly, let's copy this from last name and go to last name field, and instead of this handler name, let us paste this function body. And next let us remove this line of code as well. Next, similarly, let's do it for email as well. So let's copy this body and go to email field, and here instead of passing the function name, let us pass the function body itself. Next we can remove this line of code. So this is how we can refactor the code and we can reduce some amount of code. So this is basically the best practice we use while developing the React application. In next lecture we will connect our React application to add employee REST API, and we'll send the add employee form details to the add employee REST API, and then add employee REST API will save those form details into a MySQL database. Alright, great. I will see you in the next lecture. Hi everyone, welcome back. In this lecture we are going to connect our React application to add employee REST API. Well, in previous lecture we have designed add employee form, and whenever users submit this form, then our React application have to connect to add employee REST API, and then our React application will send this form information to add employee REST API, and add employee REST API internally store this form data into MySQL database. Alright, great. So let us take a look into the development steps. In an employee service, we will write the REST client code to call add employee REST API using Axios. Next we will change employee component to call employee service method. Next we will navigate to list employee page after form submission done, and finally we will test all these changes. Alright, so let us head over to employee service and let us write the REST client code to call add employee REST API using Axios. So here let us head over to VS Code and go to employee service.js file, and here let us write the REST client code to call add employee REST API. So let us create the arrow function and let us export it. So export const, and then let's give the name create employee, and this is arrow function, and this arrow function takes employee object, and this employee object holds the employee form data. Next arrow symbol, and then call Axios dot post. Well, in order to send the post HTTP request, we have to use post method. Next let us pass the URL, that is REST API base URL, and second parameter is a employee object. Perfect. Now we have written a REST client code to call add employee REST API using Axios.post method. Alright, great. Next let us take a look into next step. Next step is change employee component to call employee service method. Well, just now we have created create employee method in a employee service. So let us call this method from the employee component. So go to employee component over here. So here we have save employee function. So within this save employee function, let us call the create employee method from employee service.js file. So here let us call create employee method from employee service, and make sure that this create employee should import it at the top. Next, this create employee expect employee object. So let us pass this employee object, and notice here this employee object contains first name, last name, email. Next, let us call then method, and then this then method expect the promise object. It contains the response. So here response, and then let us get the response using arrow function over here. So here let us print the response console.log and then response.data. Perfect. Now we have changed employee component to call create employee method from employee service. Next, let us take a look into next step. Next step is navigate to list employees page after form submission done. Well, whenever user submit add employee form, then user have to navigate to the list of employees page, isn't it? So let us write the logic to navigate user to list employees page after form submission done. So let us go to our project again. So in order to navigate user from one page to another page, we can use navigate hook. So here let us first import use navigate hook. Import and then use navigate hook from React Router DOM library. Perfect. So use navigate hook is nothing but a JavaScript function. So we can call use navigate hook here, and then we can assign this function to a variable. So const and then navigator equal to use navigate. Okay. Next, let us go ahead and let us use this navigator within this create employee method. So after this console.log, just call navigator, and then let us pass the URL, that is /employees. And notice here this /employees will navigate to the list employee component. For example, if you go to app.jsx and you can see the route /employees. So whenever user hit this link in the browser, then user should navigate to list employee component, isn't it? Perfect. Next, let's go back to employee component.jsx. Now we have navigated user to list of employees page whenever a user submit this add employee form. Next, let us take a look on the next step. Next step is test about changes. Next, let us go to our project and let us see our application is up and running in a development server or not. Yes, our application is up and running. Let's go to browser and just refresh. Now let us fill up the add employee form over here. So first name, let us say Tom, last name Cruz, email tom@gmail.com, and click on submit button, and there we go. You can able to see here Tom employee is added to the list of employees table. Alright, and you can see the console log here. The response is printed. The response contains ID 6. It means our React application is successfully connected with add employee REST API. Well, let us verify this data in a database as well. So let us go to MySQL workbench over here and go to EMS database, go to employees table, and look at here Tom employee successfully inserted in an employees table. It means we have successfully connected our React application to add employee REST API, and we have stored the employee form data into a employees table. Alright, perfect. In next lecture, we will see how to validate the add employee form. Alright, yet I will see you in the next lecture. Hi everyone, welcome back. In this lecture, we are going to add a validation to add employee form. Well, if you go to our React application and go to add employee page, so here we haven't added any validation to the add employee form. For example, if I click on submit, it will add a empty entry in the list of employees table, and in a database also the empty values are inserted. For example, here let me select the rows from employees table, and notice here employee ID is empty, first name is empty, last name is empty. So this is not a good idea to store the null values or empty values in a database columns. Alright, so let us go ahead and let us add the validation to add employee form so that user have to enter the data in the fields. Okay, so let us go to the presentation and look at here the screenshot. So we're going to basically add a validation that looks something like this. The first name is required, last name is required, email ID is required. Next, let us take a look into the development steps. First, we use state hook to initialize the state variables that will hold below validation errors. Next, we will write the validation function that checks the form data and returns validation errors. Next, we will validate the form on submission. Next, we'll display the validation errors, and finally we're going to test all these changes. Alright, so very simple steps. The first step is we're going to use state hook to initialize the state variables that will hold the validation errors. So let us go to our project and go to employee component over here. So let me maximize this, and here let us type use state. Make sure that you choose use state from React library, and then let us pass the initial value as an object, and the object has the attributes like first name. Let us give empty, and then last name let us keep empty, and then email let us keep empty. So these are the object attributes to hold the validation errors with respect to the state variables. Okay, next, this use state hook returns an array. So here const and then array. So let us give the state variable name as errors and the function name as set errors. Perfect. Now we have used use state hook to initialize the state variables that holds the validation errors. Next, let us take a look into next step. Next step is we will write the validation function that will checks the form data and returns the validation errors. So let us go back to our employee component over here, and here we are going to write the JavaScript function that will check the form data. So here just type function and let us give function name as validate form. Alright, next within a validate form, let us declare a flag let valid equal to true. So let us keep flag as a true initially. Next, here let us have a constant variable. So let us call it as errors copy, and here let us use the spread operator to copy the errors object into this errors copy. For example, here within a curly braces 3 dot, so this is basically a spread operator. Okay, so we use spread operator to copy object into another object, and here we are going to copy the errors object. Alright, so here look at here, this errors object is nothing but a state variable, and here we are basically copying this errors object into a separate variable, and then we'll store all the validation errors in this errors copy variable. Okay, next here let us add the if condition to validate the first name. If first name dot trim, so here basically I want to trim the string. If first name is not empty, then we'll keep this validation field as a empty. For example, here errors copy dot first name, so let us keep empty because we are not going to show any validation error. If the first name is null or empty, then in the else part what we're going to do is we're going to add the validation error. For example, here errors copy dot first name equal to first name is required. So this is the validation error message, and then we'll set valid flag as a false. So here basically we have added if else condition, like if first name is not empty or not null, then we don't show any validation error. If first name is null or empty, then we'll show the validation error, that is first name is required. Okay, and then valid equal to false. Next, let us add if else condition for last name and email as well. So here if last name dot trim, then we don't show any validation error. So here just call errors copy dot last name equal to empty. Next, in the else part, errors copy dot last name equal to the validation error last name is required, and then set this valid flag as a false. Perfect. So similarly, let us add a condition for email as well. So here if dot trim, then errors copy dot email equal to empty, else errors copy dot email equal to, well, here let us give a validation error, something like email is required, and then set this valid flag as a false. Perfect. And then let us set this errors copy object to state variable using set errors method. So here just call set errors method and then pass errors copy. Okay, and finally let us return this valid flag. Okay, now we have written the validation function that checks the form data and returns the validation errors. Next, let us take a look into next step. Next step is validate form on submission. So let us go to our project again, go to employee component, go to save employee method over here, and here let us add the if condition, if validate form. So notice here this validate form method returns a boolean value, either true or false. If any one of the validation fails, then this method returns a false. Alright. Next, if this validate form returns true, then only we need to execute this logic. So here let us cut this logic and paste it in this if block. Alright. So if first name, last name, email fields are not null or not empty, then this validate form returns true and this piece of code will get executed. Okay, now we have validated the form on submission. Next, let us take a look into next step. Next step is display validation errors. So let us go back to our project again and go to the form over here and go to this div. Here we have input field and here we have a class name. So basically we need to display the CSS class based on the condition. Okay, so if you go to browser, in a new tab just search for Bootstrap validation, click on this first link. So here basically we need to use validation related couple of Bootstrap CSS classes. For example, we are going to use is invalid CSS class, and then we are going to use invalid feedback. Okay, so these two CSS classes we are going to use to add the validation to the input fields. Alright, so let's go back to our project and here go to input field for this first name, and here is a class name property. So here we need to dynamically set the Bootstrap CSS class based on the validation error. If validation error is there, then we'll add is invalid CSS class, otherwise we'll add form control class. Okay, so here just remove this form control and let us write the JavaScript code to dynamically add the Bootstrap CSS class. So here within a curly braces, just add the backtick symbol. So notice here this is not a single quote, this is a backtick symbol, and then form control. Next we need to add the one more Bootstrap CSS class based on the validation error. If there is a validation error, then only we will add a is invalid Bootstrap CSS class. For that, let us write the code here. Dollar within a curly braces, just access this errors object. It has a first name. Alright, so if the first name contains validation error, then what we're going to do is we're going to add a Bootstrap CSS class that is hyphen invalid. Perfect. If there is a no validation error, then what we're going to do is we're going to keep empty. Alright, perfect. So here we have added a condition. So based on the validation error, we will add the Bootstrap CSS class. Okay, perfect. Next, we need to show the validation error message right after the input text box. So here go to input element. After this input element, let us add the JavaScript code. So here errors dot first name. So if the first name contains the validation error message, then we're going to display that validation error message in a div. So for that, Let us add the condition and then let us have a div. Let us close this div over here, and let us add the bootstrap CSS class for this div. So class name, and let us give the bootstrap class name, that is invalid feedback. Perfect. Next, let us display this validation error message. So within a curly braces, errors dot first name. Perfect. Now we have displayed the validation error message for this first name field. So similarly, let us do it for last name and email as well. So here, let me copy this class name and go to last name and go to input element, and here we have a class name. So let us remove this and paste it over here, and here let us change from first name to last name. Perfect. Next, go to first name field over here and just copy this and go to last name. After this input element, just paste it, and let us change the attribute from first name to last name, and here also change from first name to last name. Okay, now we have displayed the validation error message for last name. So let us do it for email as well. So let me copy this class name and go to email and just paste it here, and just change from the last name to email, and here just copy this and go to email. After this input element, just paste it, and let us change from last name to email, and here also let us change from last name to email. Perfect. Now we have displayed the validation error message for all the input fields. Okay, next let us take a look at the next step. Next step is test about changes. So let us go to our project and let us say our application is up and running or not. Well, our application is up and running. Let's go to browser and let us test all the changes. So here go to our React application, and here let me refresh this add employee page, and let me click on submit button. Well, notice here the error in the console. Even though we have added a validation, but our React application is calling add employee REST API. So let us see what is the issue. So go to our React application and go to employee component over here, and here go to save employee method, and look at here in the if condition we have called valid form method, right? So here basically we need to provide the open close braces like this. So in order to call the JavaScript function, this is the syntax, right? Now we have corrected the syntax. Next, let us save this file, and let's go back to browser, and now let us refresh and then click on submit button, and there we go. You can able to see the validation is successfully applied to add employee form. All right, the first name is required, last name is required, email is required. Okay, next let us fill up the form. So first name John, last name Sina, and then email john@gmail.com, and click on submit, and there we go. John employee is added to the list of employees table, and here you can see in the console the response contains the ID 14. Let us verify in a database table. So go to MySQL point, go to employees table, and look at here John employee successfully inserted in the employees table. It means we have successfully added a validation to add employee form. In next lectures, we will start implementing update employee feature in a React application. Alright, yet I will see you in the next lecture. Hi everyone, welcome back. In next couple of lectures, we are going to implement update employee feature in a React application. So in this lecture, we are going to add update button, title, and a route. So if you can see the screenshot over here, we are going to add the update button like this, and whenever user want to update the employee, then user can go ahead and click on update button. So this will navigate to the update page, and from there user can update the employee. Alright, so in this project we are going to use the employee component to perform both the operations like add employee and update employee. Alright, so instead of creating a separate component for update operation, we can use a single employee component to perform both add employee and update employee operations. Alright, so here are the development steps. First, we're going to add update button to the list employees page. For example, we're going to add the update button to list employees page like this. Next, we'll add a route for update employee in the app component. Change page title dynamically. Well, we are going to use employee component to perform both add and update operations. So dynamically, we have to change the page title. For example, if you look at here, the add employee page. So in case of add employee operation, the page title should be add employee, and in case of update employee operation, the page title should be update employee, right? So we're going to change this page title, dynamically based on the operation. Next, we're going to test all the changes. Okay, the first step is add update button to the list employees page. So let us go to our project in VS Code and go to list employee component and go to table and go to table heading and go to table row here, and here let us add one more column. So let us call it as actions. So within actions column, we can add the buttons like delete, update. All right. Next, correspond to these actions columns, we are going to add the button. So go to table body, go to table row, and here let us add TD element. Within a TD element, let us add the button. So here just type button and let us give button name as update. Next, let us add Bootstrap CSS classes to this button. So here let us use class name property and let us give Bootstrap CSS classes like button info. Next, whenever user click on this update button, then we have to handle the onClick event, isn't it? For that, let us have onClick event handler, and then here we need to pass the handler function name. So if you can notice here, we need to pass the employee ID to the handler function. So for that, let us use the arrow function over here. So this is the arrow function, and let us give the function name something like update employee, and then we need to pass the employee ID. So here employee dot ID. So here we have an employee object, so we can get the ID from the employee object like this. Okay, perfect. Now we have added a button and we have passed the handler function to this onClick event. Next, if you go back to browser and if you go to employees page over here, you can see update button is added in the actions column. So whenever user click on this update button, then user should have to navigate to the update employee page. For that, we need to configure the route. Well, if you look at the development steps, second step is add a route for update employee in an app component. So let us configure the route. So let's go to VS Code, go to app.jsx file, and here let me write the comment first. So whenever user click on this link like localhost 3000 edit -employee /employee ID, then user should have to navigate to the employee component. So here just create the route and then path and then in the URL edit employee, and we need to pass the employee ID dynamically. For that, here is the syntax :ID. And next, let us use element property to configure the component. So within a curly braces, just pass the component, that is employee component, just close it. Okay, so whenever user hit this link in the browser, then user should navigate to the employee component. All right, perfect. Next, let us go to list employee component over here, and in previous step we have added update button, right? So whenever user click on this update button, then we have to handle this onClick event handler. So here we have written the handler name, but we haven't implemented this handler. So here let's create the JavaScript function. Let us give the function name as update employee, and it takes ID as a parameter. Next, whenever user click on this update button, user have to navigate to the update employee page, right? So here let us use navigate hook to navigate user to the update employee page. So here let us call navigator. Navigator is nothing but use navigate hook. Next we need to pass the URL, that is edit employee, and we need to pass the employee ID in the URL. So here is the syntax, backtick symbol and then slash edit employee slash, and then we need to pass the employee dynamically. So here is the syntax, dollar within curly braces, just pass the ID. Okay, so make sure that you add the backtick symbol, not the single quote like this. Okay, so just enclose this URL in a backtick symbols, not in a single quote. Alright, perfect. Next, let us take a look into next step. Next step is change page title dynamically. Well, this employee component supports both the operations like add employee, update employee. So let us change the page title dynamically based on the employee ID. So let us go back to employee component, and here let us write one JavaScript function. So just type function and let's use function name as page title. So notice here within this function we have to write the logic like if employee ID is present in the URL, then we need to return the page title as update employee or else add employee. Alright, so let us get the employee ID from the URL by using use params hook. So here go at the top, and here let us import the use params hook from React Router DOM. So here use params hook from React Router DOM library. So this use params hooks is a JavaScript function. So here just call use params hook, and this hook returns object with key value pair, and we just want key. So here const and then just add a destructuring and then pass ID. Okay, now we got the ID by using use params hook. Next, let us use this ID in a page title method. So go to page title method. Within that, let's add a if condition, and if ID is present, then we need to simply return the page title as update employee. So here we have page title. So let us copy this and go to page title method and just return update employee. In a else part, return page title as a add employee. Perfect. Next, go to this S2 element over here, just remove this, and we need to dynamically add the page title. So let us write the JavaScript code. So within a curly braces, just call this page title method. Alright, so let us remove this semicolon. Okay, perfect. Now we have added the page title dynamically based on the employee ID. Okay, perfect. Next, let us go to the development steps. The final step is test all the changes. So let us go back to our project and let us see our project is up and running or not. Well, our project is up and running in a development server. Next, let us go to browser and let us test all these changes. So go to React application in the browser and go ahead and click on this update button, and there we go. The user is successfully navigated to update employee page, and you can see the URL edit employee /2. So 2 is nothing but the employee ID. It means we have successfully added update button in a list of employees table, and we have added route to this update employee page, and we have also updated the page title dynamically based on the employee ID. Alright, good. In next lecture, what we're gonna do is we're gonna connect our React application to get employee REST API. Well, if you look at the update form, so we have to populate this update employee form with the data so that user can go ahead and update the employee details, isn't it? So in order to populate this employee form, we have to connect our React application to get employee REST API, and we'll get the response and we'll populate this form. Alright, great. I will see you in the next lecture. Hi everyone, welcome back. In this lecture, we want to connect our React application to get employee REST API, and we need to populate the response of this REST API in a update employee form. Well, if we go to our React application, so here we have update employee form. So in order to update the employee, we have to populate that employee data in the update employee form, isn't it? So in order to do that, let us connect our React application to get employee REST API and populate the response of this REST API in a update employee form. For example, if you look at the screenshot over here, we are going to populate the update employee form with the data like first name, last name, and email like this. Alright, great. Next, let us take a look into the development steps. In the employee service, let us write the REST client code to call getEmployee REST API using Axios. Next, we will use effect hook to populate the employee data in the form for update operation. Next, we will test all these changes. Alright, so first step is, in the employee service, let us write the REST client code to call getEmployee REST API using Axios. So let us go to our project and go to employee service.js file, and here let us write the REST client code to call getEmployee REST API. So let us create an arrow function and let us export it. So here export const, and let us give the variable name getEmployee, and this method takes employee ID as a parameter, and then arrow symbol, and then call Axios dot get. Well, in order to make the HTTP GET request, we can use GET method over here, and then pass REST API base URL. Next, we need to append this employee ID to this base URL. So here single quote slash and then employee ID. Perfect. Now we have written a REST client code to call getEmployee REST API using Axios.get method. Next, let us take a look into next step. Next step is use effect hook to populate the employee data in the form for update operation. So let us go back to our project and go to employee component over here. So let me minimize this. Next, go to employee component. Within employee component, here let's call use effect hook, and here use effect hook takes two parameters. First parameter is a callback function, second parameter is a dependency list. So let us call use effect hook, and let us pass first parameter as a arrow function, second parameter is a dependency list. So here let us add ID as a dependency. Okay, perfect. Next, within a use effect hook, let us write the logic like if ID is present, then we'll populate the update employee form with the response of the REST API. So here just call getEmployee method from employee service, and then pass employee ID as a parameter to this method, and then call then method, and then response object, and then arrow function. So next we have to set the data from response to these state variables. For example, here we have state variables like first name, last name, email, and we have to set the data to these state variables using the respective methods. Okay, so here just call set first name method, and then pass response dot data dot first name. Similarly, let us call set last name method, and then pass response dot data dot last name. Next, set email, and then response dot data dot email. Perfect. Next, let us have also a catch block, catch, and then error object, and then arrow function, console dot error method, and then pass error object. Perfect. Next, let us take a look into next step. Next step is test above changes. So let us go back to our project and look at here our applications up and running in a development server. Next, let us go to browser, and here go to list of employees page, and just go ahead and click on this update button, and there we go. You can able to see here the update employee form is populated with the data like first name Sanjay, last name Jadhav, email sanjay@gmail.com. Okay, now you might be wondering how this data is displayed in this input text box. Well, let me explain that. So go to VS Code ID again, go to employee component over here, and here we have called getEmployee method. It returns the response of the REST API, and here we are using set first name method to set the response, that is first name, to the state variable first name, right? And this first name we have used in the form. For example, if you go to form go to first name field, go to input element, and here you can see value and then first name state, and this first name state basically contains the value. Okay, similarly you can go to last name and you can see the input element, value, last name, state variable, and this state variable basically contains the data. Okay, next email. So email state variable also contains the data, and this data we are basically setting over here by using the respective set method. Okay, so this is how the data will be populated in the form fields using state variables. In next lecture, we'll connect our React application to update employee REST API, and we'll send this updated form information to the update employee REST API, and then update employee REST API will update that data into a database. Alright, I will see you in the next lecture. Hi everyone, welcome back. In this lecture, we are going to connect our React application to update employee REST API. Well, in previous lecture, we have populated the update employee form with the data. Next, once user submit this update employee form, then we have to call update employee REST API, and then we have to send this updated employee data to the update employee REST API, and then update employee REST API will store that updated information into the database. Alright, great. So let us take a look into the development steps. First step, in the employee service, we need to write a REST client code to call update employee REST API using ReactJS. Next, we will change employee component dot save or update employee method to perform both add and update employee operations. And next, we will test all these changes. Alright, so let's go to employee service file, and let us write the REST client code to call update employee REST API. So let us go to our project and go to employee service.js file, and here let us write the REST client code. So let us have export and then const. Let us give variable name update employee, and let us pass the parameters. First parameter is the employee ID, second parameter is the employee object. So this employee object basically contains the updated employee information, and next arrow symbol, and then call ReactJS dot put. Well, in order to make the HTTP put request, we have to use put method over here, and then pass the REST API base URL. Next, let us append the employee ID to this URL. For that, let us use a concatenation operator plus, and then single quote slash plus employee ID. So this is the first parameter. Second parameter is the employee object. Perfect. Now we have written a REST client code to call update employee REST API using ReactJS.put method. Next, let us take a look into next step. Next step is change employee component dot save or update employee method to perform both add and update employee operations. Well, let's go to employee component over here and go to save employee method. So within a save employee method, let's write the logic. Well, this save employee method supports both add employee and update employee operations. So let us rename this save employee method from save employee to save or update employee. Next, copy this function name and go to form and go to submit button, and here we have save employee handler method name. So let us remove this and paste this save or update employee handler method name. Okay, perfect. Next, let's go back to save or update employee method over here, and here let's write the logic to support update employee operation as well. Next, within this if condition, let's add one more if condition over here. If employee ID is present in the URL, then only we'll execute the update employee logic. So here within a if condition, just call update employee method from employee service, and then pass employee ID as a first parameter, and then employee object as a second parameter. So here what we're going to do is we're going to cut this piece of code and we'll keep at a top, and then here the employee object is available. So just pass employee object and then call then method, and then have a response object over here, and then have a function. Perfect. So here let us print the response console.log and then response.data. Perfect. So once user submit the update employee form, then user have to navigate to the list of employees page. For that, let us have a navigator and then within a single quote /employees. Perfect. So here let us also have a catch block. So catch and then error object and then arrow function console.error and then pass error object. Perfect. Next, let us have a else block. Within else block, let us keep this add employee logic. Just cut it and paste here. Perfect. And go to this create employee method, and here also we can have a catch block. So catch and then error object and then arrow function console dot just call error method and then pass error object. Perfect. Now we have updated save or update employee method to support both update employee and add employee operations. Okay, next let us take a look at the next step. Next step is test about changes. So let us go back to our project and look at here our application is up and running in a development server. Next, let's go to browser and let us test all these changes. So here, go to our application and go to employees page over here, and let me clear the console and let me click on update button, and here let's update the first name from Sanjay to Sanjay123, last name Jada123, sanjay123@gmail.com. Click on submit and look at here, the employee first name is updated, last name is updated, and email ID is also updated. It means we have successfully connected our React application with update employee REST API, and update employee REST API stored the updated employee information into a database. Alright, so let us verify in a database as well. So go to MySQL bench, go to employees table, and look at here the Sanjay employee. First name is updated, last name is updated, and email ID is also updated. It means we have successfully implemented update employee feature. Okay. Now let us add a new employee and let us update that new employee. So here click on add employee button and let us add an employee. So let us give the employee name Meena, last name Padtare, email ID meena@gmail.com. Click on submit. Now the Meena employee is added to the list. Next, let us update this Meena employee. So click on update button. Let us give first name as Meenakshi and then change the email ID meenakshi@gmail.com. Click on submit and look at here the first name is updated. Email ID is also updated. It means update employee feature is working as expected. In next lecture, we'll implement delete employee feature. Alright, yet I will see you in the next lecture. Hi everyone, welcome back. In this lecture, we are going to implement delete employee feature in a React application. Well, if you look at the screenshot over here, we are going to add a delete button in actions column like this. And whenever user want to delete the particular employee, then user can go ahead and click on the corresponding employee, delete button. For example, here let us say user want to delete the Ramesh employee, then user can go ahead and click on this delete button to delete this Ramesh employee. All right, great. So here let us take a look into development steps. In the employee service, we will add the REST client code to call delete employee REST API using ReactJS. Next, we will add a delete button to list employees table. Next, we will create a JavaScript function to handle delete button event. And finally, we are going to test all these changes. Okay, so let us go to employee service and then let us write the REST client code to call delete employee REST API using ReactJS. So here let's head over to VS Code. I go to employee service.js file and here let us write the REST client code. So here export const and let us give variable name delete employee and then pass employee ID as a parameter to this method and then arrow function and then call ReactJS.delete. Well, in order to make HTTP delete request, we can use delete method and then pass REST API base URL. Next, we need to append this employee ID to this URL. So here let's have a concatenation operator that is plus within a single quote slash and then employee ID. Perfect. Now we have written a REST client code to call delete employee REST API using ReactJS.delete method. Next, let us take a look into next step. Next step is add delete button to list employees table. So let us go to our project and go to list employee component over here, and here we have a table, and go to table body, and here we have already a update button. So similarly, let us add the delete button. So here let us have a button, and let us give name to the button as delete, and let us add the Bootstrap CSS classes. So here class name property, and then Bootstrap CSS class name button danger. Perfect. Next, let us have a onClick event handler. For that, let us call onClick property, and here we need to pass the handler function name. So we need to also pass the employee ID. So let us use the arrow function to pass the employee ID to the handler method. So arrow function, and let us give the function name as remove employee, and then pass employee.id. Perfect. Next, let us implement this remove employee event handler method. So just copy this method and go to return statement, and just above this return statement, just create a JavaScript function, and then remove employee, and then pass employee ID. And here let us have a console.log just to print this employee ID. Perfect. Next, let's go to browser and look at here the delete button is added to the actions column. Next, just right click, inspect, and go to console, clear the console, and click on the delete button, and you can see here the ID 2 is printed in a console. It means the ID is available in a remove employee method. Okay, next let us call delete employee method from employee service, and make sure that this delete employee method is imported at the top. Alright, next let us pass employee ID as a parameter to this method, and then call then method, and then let us have a response object, and then let us use arrow function. Alright, and here let's have catch block, catch error, and then arrow function console.error, and then pass error object. Perfect. So here once user click on the delete button, then the corresponding employee will be deleted, and then user have to navigate to the list of employees page, isn't it? Next, if you go to use effect hook, so here we have written the logic like we have called list employees method from employee service. So here what we can do is we can have this logic in a separate method. So let us cut this logic, and here let's create a separate JavaScript function get all employees, and then paste this logic. And next go to use effect hook, and here simply call this get all employees method. Okay, perfect. Now we have quickly refactored this code. So we have created a separate function, and we have kept the logic over here. Next, we can call this function in a remove employee method as well. So go to remove employee method, go to this delete employee call, and here just call get all employees. Next, let us take a look into next step. Next step is test above changes. Well, let's go to our project and look at here our React application is up and running in a development server. Next, let us go to browser and let us test all these changes. So here go to list of employees page, and let us say we want to delete the employee that is Sanjay123. So go ahead and click on the corresponding delete button, and there we go, the Sanjay employee is deleted. Next, let us say we want to delete the employee with ID 7. Just click on the corresponding delete button. There we go, the employee is successfully deleted. It means the delete employee feature is working as expected. Well, notice here update and delete button. So both the buttons are attached. So let us give some space between update and delete buttons. So let us go to our project and go to list employee component and go to delete button over here, and here let us add the inline style. So for that, let us call style property and then object, and then it has margin left. So let us call margin left, and let us give value as 10 pixel. Perfect. Next, let us save this file and let's go to browser. And now look at here. There's a space between update and delete buttons. Now it looks good, isn't it? So next, let us click on the delete button to delete the employee with ID 6. And there we go. It means we have successfully implemented delete employee feature. Alright, I will see you in the next lecture.